Audio?
Oh, okay, well,
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to night 5 of the joint Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance budget hearings for the town of Fairfield, 2013-2014. Everybody, please rise. I'm going to ask our Selectwoman, Mrs. Krista McCarthy-Vahey, to lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to night 5. Tonight is Public Works night, and we'll hear budgets related to Public Works Administration, Public Works Operations, flood and erosion control, which I think is now part of the Public Works Operations budget, the Building Department, Engineering, Street Lights, Solid Waste and Recycling, always a favorite, and WPCA. So those are the items we'll hear this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Michelangelo. First of all, welcome to your first budget hearing with us here as head of Public Works, and we look forward to working with you. So I'll turn it over to you, and we can start with Department number 5011, which is Public Works Administration. And let us find the page number. Caitlin, do you have? 201, thank you. Mr. Bolito's one step ahead of me, as usual. All right, so we'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, I'll try to highlight some of the major items and talk through. As you said, it's my first time through the process, so I'll try to report as much as possible and answer any questions you may have. So Public Works Administration is basically the largely a salary-driven account. It's comprised of the administrative end that oversees all aspects of the department, the director, myself, Assistant Director Ed Bowman, Scott Bartlett, the Public Works Superintendent, a full-time secretary, a part-time secretary. So the as I said, the account is largely salary and benefit driven. Slight reduction in the overall budget, basically because of the salary difference between my predecessor and myself. Tried to keep most of the line items fairly constant. Any increases are minor, and where I saw where based on past uses and what I expect.
All right, so this budget, just so that we frame it appropriately, this budget in 2013, the year we're currently in, was $583,926. The request this year is $572,981, and that is a 1.9% decrease in the budgeted amount. And again, this is the administration portion of the Public Works budget. Questions, comments from board members on this budget? Anyone? Yes, Mr. Stone.
On the payroll, you're down. Are less people?
No, I think the payroll is just a differentiation of the, I think my starting salary was probably around 18,000 less than what Rich White ended with. So basically, it's the same amount of people, just the delta between that.
Mr. Stone, page 204 has some detail there if you need more. Any other questions?
Mr. Stone can count to 203.
Quick question. How does the union negotiations and all that affect these salary lines? What's included here, not included?
The same as for each of the departments. What's included here doesn't make any assumptions about the union negotiations.
Okay, so
So any incremental impact of those is contained in the reserve accounts within the contingency.
okay. So this does not account for any salary adjustments that are pending due to union negotiations. Those are accounted for separately within the budget at the
Correct.
present point in time because we do not have an approved contract.
Correct.
Okay, so once that contract is approved, just so everybody's clear on the procedure here, once that contract is settled and approved, those funds would be transferred out of the reserve accounts and into the departmental accounts.
Correct, much like what happened with the fire department
Yep.
contract a year ago.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Is everyone clear on that? Okay. Any questions, comments further on this? All right, we'll go on to the next department, which is Public Works Operations, which is Department 5030, and that is page number, it starts on 207, or rather 206 in the book, and the numbers are on 208 and 209. And this goes up by almost $1.1 million here, a 7.9% increase. So, Mr. Michelangelo, please.
Okay. One of the things that you see that I did,
And by the way, I'm sorry, again, Mr. Tetro, same thing with this department, in that any salary differential year over year is not included here.
Correct. Same thing with pretty much every department you look at that would be affected
This
by
evening.
any contracts that haven't been settled.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we specifically note those departments. Please, Mr. Michelangelo.
okay. I'll start off with the big elephants in the account. The capital account for equipment, one of the things that I did when I started here in September, worked with Scott and Jeff Cornwall, the fleet manager, just to go over, our rolling stock, which is a significant part of our operations. And, our guys do a good job of maintaining the fleet, but one of the things that struck me was the age of some of the equipment. So I realized that the department request was quite substantial, over 1.5 million. But I wanted to, as part of my process of identifying the equipment that was, it needed to be replaced, and I realized that is somewhat unrealistic, but I wanted we went through the exercise anyway, so I wanted to get on the table that it is something that is a concern, that our stock is getting older and older, and for a part, we could defray some of these, but we're not really eliminating the expense, we're just pushing them down the road little by little. So my request was for 1.55 million. In working with the first selectman about prioritizing, whittling that down, his request, you could see, was for 437,000, and that was done in conjunction. We started with the big list, and we kept whittling it down and whittling it down. So that is an increase over previous years. But once again, it's both a figure we think we could need and we could live with. Another major change in this budget, or somewhat of a major change. This budget is fully funding our paving program, which is 3.5 million. So that previously had been divided between some in operating budget, some in capital budget. This puts the paving fully in the operating budget. And as you know, this total operations side of the budget is the largest single portion of the Public Works budget. This is basically where all our physical services on our roads, our town buildings, our bridges, our beaches, our parks, basically all the physical activity we do on our marina is out of this account here. So there's, we can touch on some of the larger, I highlighted a couple of the items. Scott, I don't know if you want to touch on some of the larger ones, or?
For clarification, the 53310, excuse me, which is rental and storage, you'll see a significant drop, and that is because we always had snow contractors rolled into the rental and storage account, and we felt that that served better going into contracted property services. So you'll see an overall increase on the contracted property services. 50,000 of that is snow removal contractors. The other difference is primarily tree removal or tree trimming contractors. So that just justifies the decrease, or helps explain the decrease in rental and storage and the partial increase in contracted services. I'm not sure if there's any other significant ones.
Motor vehicle fuel and lube is up substantially.
Yeah, again, we just prorate. We do a good job annually of capturing what we've spent in the previous year, and then we get the assumptions from Twig in terms of what to plug in for, a number on all those fuels. So
So why are we going up so much? We're going up a substantial amount year over year, almost 20%.
I'm not certain, does Linda, do you know if the price of fuel itself is up? Because I think my consumption is pretty much,
Fire department went up 14.5%. So I don't know what.
I don't recall my consumption, going up at a rapid rate, so I'm of the opinion it's more tied into the cost of the purchase of the item, not the consumption of it at this time.
Linda, can we ask Twig to report to us what she's seeing in fuel costs and energy costs, and so that we can look at this from a global perspective, please? Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Bartlett, go right ahead.
No problem. The other one that stands out on the page is communications. The communications in our account is twofold. It's a cell phone service, but equally important to that is our two-way radio communication. And we are investing by necessity into a band system because we're being instructed that the current band that we use will no longer be available. So that's an improvement that we feel we have to make to assure ourselves the ability to keep the two-way radios working. I'm not sure if there's any other large items that you wish to address.
Let's go to the board for questions. And Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. The line number, middle of the page on 208, line 54010, contracted property services. If you could just highlight exactly what that is. I'm assuming that's independent contractors you use along the way?
That is 100% correct. I can describe briefly some of their activities
Yeah,
from
please.
Porta-John servicing, which means basically we'll move Porta-Johns in different seasons towards different facilities. That is the delivery of, maintenance of those, line painting on our fields. We've truly gotten out of the grass business from a cost perspective. We find it, our labor rate compared to what the landscapers are willing to cut the grass for, so we've gone, I'd say 95% in. I'm trying to think of the other highlights. Obviously, again, numbers have shown us that we can run an in-house crew comparable to a contracted crew for tree services, and we feel that's probably one of the most risky things we do. So from a workers' comp perspective, we lean to put that one outside. So we currently run a three-man in-house crew, and we'll run up to two-man outsourced crews.
Right.
But on the hourly value, it's actually a better return for us.
Right.
I'm reading from the sheet, so I'll just, I had
Sure, please.
I had the benefit of looking up as Scott was talking, but basically custodial services is a large part of it. Ball field painting, tree trimming and removal is to the tune of $300,000, so that's significant. Catch basin cleaning, storm drainage cleaning is all in the $50,000, $80,000 range. Lawn mowing, which Scott mentioned, is $125,000. Hydro seeding, $12,000. So there's a lot of large ticket items
Sure.
that make up that.
Okay. Now, you both mentioned the fact that in some instances, like for example, with grass cutting, that we save money by hiring independent contractors to do it. In the case of tree trimming, there's a liability that we can pass on to an independent person rather than the town taking that on itself. Are there any other areas that you've been able to identify in what you do in the day-to-day business that you're in that would benefit from looking outside of the department and using independent contractors, either for cost savings or for liability, pushing off?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that trend has really been in place because we've,
Right.
For example, line painting we used to do in-house, and we found ourselves fairly ineffective. By the time we ran the paint through the machine, spent an hour at the end of the day to clean the machine, the productivity wasn't there for us. It was better to farm it out, and the contractors come in on their night shifts and blow out the lines at a much, better clip for us. Joe and I just had a good conversation about this today, and basically, we'd like to believe we take every job as it comes along, and we look at it and see where it stacks up in terms of how busy we are we equipped for it, is there better pricing available in the outside market. There's times we actually spin and we'll put an item out to bid, and if we don't like the bid numbers, then go ahead and do it in-house. But basically, I'd like to believe, we've been looking at that. Field line painting's the same thing, same theory as far as maintenance on the equipment. Obviously a different animal, it's not on the road, it's on the field, but the principles stay the same. If you're spending, an hour, hour and a half to clean a machine in an 8-hour day, by the time you set up in the morning, travel to the facilities, it's easier for us to quantify those, put it out in a bid, and I don't care where the contractor comes from, as long as he gets to all those fields, we'll pay him to mark them per field. So
Right.
I think we've been doing that. Custodial services is another good one. Honestly, we're getting tremendous pricing today on custodial services. Tough economy, people willing to work a little cheaper than our labor rate. We'll take advantage of that right now.
So it sounds like you do it on a case-by-case basis, but you are constantly evaluating, what can be outsourced and what can't. Is there anything that you guys do that you will not, as a matter of policy, outsource?
I can't think of anything. I really think we test the waters. We're quite pleased. A few years ago, you might recall that with the union's cooperation, we put a weekend shift to work, and that actually has turned us great numbers because we did the same test there, which was we put that out to private contract, got numbers, and fairly competitive for round one pickup on a given Saturday or Sunday. But where they really walloped you is if they had to go around a second time. We have that control so we can get to the beaches a second time, we can get to those facilities, but yet we have a flat daily rate for that with the support of the union. So, I think that was a case where we felt and feel better that we do that activity in-house.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stone?
Now that you're sort of farming a lot of things out, you still have the same amount of people working. Is there a way to eliminate a few people or lower the workforce, or are they doing things that they haven't been doing before, or,
Well, it's a little of both. We did downsize 3 years ago. We gave up 3 positions. Or maybe it was even 2 years ago. We went from 79 to 76. And that was, not totally by outsourcing, but we felt that due to that current economy, we could do so. To answer your question, I think we're living in an arena today where we've become very much a 7-day operation. So I'm not certain the answer is, the answer may be to reevaluate some of the services we provide, but I do believe we've become a 7-day operation. And again, there's a union president right in the back of the room, and him and I have a strong relationship, but I'm sure he doesn't like the fact that I'm talking about how we run our business model. But to his credit, and to the union's credit, they get the overall picture, and I, basically preach to them, we have to be successful together, because if we're not successful, then everything will be outsourced. So, it's a moving target. I don't think we should do less right now, because I think the expectation is for more. Beaches are frequented even in off-season, forget the storms, obviously, but people still want to take their dogs down, so it doesn't lessen our work. Once upon a time, you could almost turn your back to the beaches. Nowadays, we comb the beaches once a week in the winter and almost daily in the spring and summer. And that's just, again, based on usage. And at any time, I suppose, again, we can reevaluate the necessity, but I basically get the signal from your recreation camps, and, basically you can look at our calls and complaints we get, and it kind of steers where we think we have to be.
Mr. Stone, are you good? I'm going to go to Mr. DeWitt.
That actually was my exact same question for Mr. Stone. But having heard your answer, if you weren't working 7 days a week, be curious to know what that could do for your, if we weren't combing the beaches on Saturday and Sunday, and I get it. There's things that probably need work on Saturday and Sunday that are a lot more important than worrying about somebody's dog getting stuck in a hole on the beach. But just out of curiosity, that would be a great number to have.
Yeah. Well, again, I can tell you this, we don't, and if I represented that we comb the beach, we don't comb the beach on Saturdays and Sundays other than an abnormal high tide.
No, understand, yeah,
Boring
sure.
history, but just to tell you the reality. If you're sitting in my world during the prime beach season on a Friday night and there's a high tide predicted, then I will run the comber. And that's only because if you ever saw a band of seaweed come in, and if you don't get it on a Saturday or Sunday, the phone's going to be ringing by Monday. What are you doing? The beaches reek. Because once that seaweed bakes in that sun, it's terrible. So we will cheat and on occasion run that. But the weekend shift primarily gives us a tremendous savings in our garbage collection and restroom cleaning. in the summer months, and it also affords us the luxury of having personnel in position, so when a pothole pops up, a tree limb comes down, glass in the road, we're not paying somebody from the outside to come in, outside meaning a union member who's going to get time and a half to come in on that call, or double time if it's a Sunday. The crew that's in-house will finish or go out and put that fire out for us.
Just to, complement what Scott said on the staffing levels, with the number of miles of road we have, which is 273, 274. So, roads are our primary main business, even though we have a lot of other businesses. So I think our staffing level can't go dip down too low with that sheer fact of the number of miles of road that we have. And that's probably an area that, if you see what heavy construction companies charge to install drainage and stuff like that, that's pretty scary, especially when they have their insurance requirements and their profit margins. So, working on the roads, especially even in our town buildings, our core services, basically require that staffing level that can't really go too much lower than it is now. There's only so many activities you could farm out.
Mr. DeWitt, are you good?
Good, thanks.
Mr. Brockfeld?
Question that you partially just answered, but I'll ask it again just so I understand it. Chris, you were saying that, Chris, that the increase in outsourcing, as Mr. Stone asked you, hasn't resulted in a reduction in staff through attrition or otherwise because it's freed you up to do other stuff or to do an increased workload, right? And I'm sure there are plenty of viable projects that you would, you love to do. But is that something that has been discussed with the is that something that you've worked with the administration on? Because that sounds like an executive decision as opposed to a departmental decision. In other words, if your portfolio is X, and now you're subcontracting 20% of X out. I'm making these numbers up, obviously. Then yes, you can increase back up to 100% with new projects, or you can downsize your department to accommodate the fact that you're doing 80% of X now. And it strikes me that that's a first selectman's executive decision, not a departmental decision, because obviously what we want to do here, obviously, is to deliver great services, but at a cost that we can all afford, which is the word we are hearing constantly in town now, affordability. So I don't know if the question should be to Mr. Tetro or you or both of you, but...
Well, I can help Mike, and then Mike can interject, but I can only say that prior to Mike coming on board, Ken Flato and I, and as well as Rich White, had those annual discussions. And to the answer to your question, Ken did not want to downsize the workforce at those times annually when we discussed. I have not had that same open conversation yet with Mike, in fairness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we've had a little bit of storm cleanup to do in both the initial 2 years. So I think as Scott and Rich and now Joe very definitely run their department much like a private enterprise, and they have continually come back with opportunities for cost reductions or more cost effectiveness. So I think that's an ongoing, I don't think it's not a milestone, hey, we did that last year, we don't need to do it again. I think it's an ongoing discussion.
Can I just follow up?
Please.
Yeah, and by the way, I do agree. I must say that in the time I've been on the board, you guys, both Mr. White and his successor and you, I think do outstanding work, and you've impressed me over and over again. Storm Sandy was obviously maybe the apex of your career. Of course, it could have been the lowest point, too, if it didn't happen and we would have had all those pumps. But right. But I guess, again, the only reason I'm asking is that, notwithstanding that you guys do a great job, I'm still concerned about what I guess mission creep is the word I guess I would use. That it may be that we want to do more work, and we might be thrilled that we now have a little more capacity with our existing workforce. I'm just wondering if going forward, that would be a discussion, because obviously the way the budgets are set up, the only way we can really save any money, really, is through headcount and or salaries. But I mean, the first preference would be whatever. But so I guess again, I'll throw it out. If not up till now, maybe going forward, would that be a topic that would be reviewed regularly?
Yeah, I think the cost effectiveness, Ken, is an ongoing basis. We certainly have it every time at budget time in terms of what's going on, what the projects are. You have to take that also in light of what the backlog is. because it doesn't start with a clean slate. And I think especially, certainly with the storms, but let's throw the storms away for a moment. One of the points that Scott and Rich had made, and then now with Joe coming on board, is you've got to look at what the backlog is in terms of work that needs to be done and maintenance work that needs to be done around town as we do that. But yes, it's an ongoing discussion, certainly.
Anyone else? Mr. Walsh?
Gentlemen, first of all, let me congratulate the work you guys have done in your department under some stressful situations for some storms we've had in the last year, and I always find that your department does great work. So some of my comments here, just take this with a grain of salt, and that leads us to affordability, and that's an issue that this board and the Board of Selectmen and the RTM is going to have to deal with. And the first selectman's proposing almost a 6.4% increase, and I know, to me, that's unacceptable. And I've talked to other departments that have been here before you and the Board of Education and whatever, so that's something we're going to have to be looking at. And there may be cuts coming down the road, and certainly I know that you'd be able to manage to that. You might not be able to provide the same services, but you'd manage whatever. And I'd be the last person to tell you how to run your department, because I think you do an excellent job with the resources that we give you. A tremendous job. So, you know, I would totally respect that, and I'm not going to sit here and micromanage you and tell you that I should cut some fuel line by this amount because I'm a better estimator of what fuel costs would be, or, you know, whether you need this payloader versus that, or whatever. That's not something I would ever do. You guys are the experts in it, you're the professionals, and I totally respect your capabilities in that area. However, that being said, you know, I guess you guys have to respect us and the roles that the other town bodies have to do, and what we have to do for the taxpayers that elect us. And I guess my question is, if there were cuts that came down the line, do you feel those cuts, do you know where those cuts would be made, what areas they might influence first, and whether it would be in a people area, an equipment area, or something else?
Well, there are certainly a lot of line items here where we don't have any discretion, where we're going to spend a certain amount, and utilities are one, things
Sure.
like that. Where if we cut them, we'll end up spending
Sure.
that anyway. So as far as where we could cut, where there are services we can't choose to offer. The largest single line item besides salaries is the paving account, which is $3.5 million, and we feel that's, with our amount of roads, that's the amount that we feel we need to make progress on our road. Your road network is any road network, not just ours. It's getting old. It gets older. It deteriorates. So if you're not investing in the road, if you invest $1 million, you haven't gained $1 million. You've probably lost $2 million in value, if that makes sense. But that's, being the single largest line item, that's where it can make a real difference in the bottom line. But once again, that's a service that, that we could, that is immediate and it's direct. With that $3.5 million, if the budget goes into effect, July 1st, the impact, the benefit of that will be seen on our roads within 2 weeks, within 4 weeks, within 6 weeks. That goes directly to the paving, which is obviously very popular. So it's hard to pick too many other items. Obviously the capital one has been reduced pretty good. That could once again, if another large vehicle could go, that would save some money. But other than that, there's not too many services that we could identify. Scott.
Yeah, again, appreciate the question, do want to support the board. I think you all probably realize Rich and I very much, always felt when we both live in town, and Joe's moving into town, so we all feel the same burden and want to support it. I think that's the most exciting part about what we've done, is been able to get good pricing through our contractors to offset some of it, but I'm not sure what goes next. I hate to say that you could do things like less field maintenance and stuff. Yep. I mean, if it comes to that, I don't think it's something that's a deal breaker. but it's, just communications to the leagues and see what they're willing to pick up through volunteerism, things like that. And I guess you could reevaluate the equipment again, but I think, we came up with a model quite a few years back of trying to have a 5-year plan, and it seemed to me that every year we asked for like $1 million, we'd get 300,000 or 400,000. So your 5-year plan, all of a sudden, it may stay in a 5-year plan, but instead of $1 million, it's now 1.3 we're requesting, and it still doesn't get funded. So now it's up to 1.5 or 1.6. At some point, if we're looking at true savings, is it cheaper to run mechanics to fix the stuff, or is it cheaper to buy stuff that's old and needs a lot of work? So I would just be a little concerned there. But like anything else, we'll do what we have to do.
And in the backup, which I think you see, one of the things that's always been done in the past, and also in this year's budget, and one of them, maintenance and repair of buildings and grounds, 54,320. Well, there's specific items identified in the long version of the budget, and the reason for that is that so for that line item, which was 384,000, well, that's not just a made-up number. There are specific projects which that goes to. So, so every, we think that every project on that list is beneficial, but, if there was reductions needed, we'd try to identify the ones that, that maybe could be pushed off a year.
Okay. And I guess, getting back to some of the stuff Scott said, I mean, obviously, you've been cut way back on your requests over the last couple of years as we've tried to manage these budgets to a reasonable level during the recession that we've had over the last number of years. So do you find that we're at a critical point with your capital purchases based on the fact of cutting so much over the last couple of years that that's actually going to become more of a priority and not something you'd be willing to cut, and we'd have to go to other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're beginning to get to a slippery slope because, again, you could work on these things and we have, quality men that can rebuild the trucks and stuff. But again, you look at, should they be doing certain maintenance to keep a vehicle in service, or should they be rebuilding, a vehicle, and at what cost are you, how much money are you willing to put into that old vehicle? I think the cuts given right now by the selectmen, which again, I'll reemphasize what Joe said, they were mutually discussed and supported, are good. I think they're things we can live without. Deeper cuts, we'll adjust accordingly.
Okay. I appreciate your advice. Thank you.
Mrs. Albin.
Good evening. Picking up on Mr. Walsh's couple of his questions, on the paving line for 3.5 million, are you able to give us some information as to what work you would intend to do in the next fiscal year for
Yes.
that amount of money?
I definitely can. We're in the
If you
process.
can tonight, or you could provide it another time?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like
I-
that luxury if I could.
Okay,
Not to
and-
interrupt.
Quite honestly, if you could be specific enough and give us a list of roads, et cetera, because, pardon me? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm hearing out my right ear, cost per each job.
Yes.
If
I can do that.
perhaps you could give us those details?
Yeah. Yes, I'm nodding my head, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're going out to bid for most of the procedures we do. Anybody who's ever listened to my boring speech on paving, we could turn around and blacktop the whole town, and everybody loves us the first year we do it. And the reality is, we're taking down a few inches of pavement, and we're putting 2 inches of new pavement, and we're the heroes, but we've done nothing to the sub-base. So those roads that are still cracked with the road we left beneath are still going to crack through. So we've done a variety of things. Cold mix in place is one of them. And there's other procedures, and most of those are going out to bid now to start our season. So I can create a worksheet that will show you what processes we'll be doing on what roads and what those cost factors will be.
That'd be great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to come back to myself for a few, if you don't mind. First of all, I want to echo Mr. Walsh's comments regarding how well you guys in the department has performed, and talk about trial under fire. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Secondly, I also want to echo his comments regarding concerns over continued growth in spending, and the difficult challenges that we all face this year, not just ourselves, but obviously you guys. And Scott, as you, or Mr. Bartlett, as you point out, you as well are taxpayers, and you soon will be. So you can understand the tough challenge we all have ahead of us on that score. For members of the board who might not have been here at the time, and Mr. Michelangelo, I don't know what was told to you, but in the past, there had been a process whereby, or a policy whereby paving costs had been bonded, capitalized, and amortized over a 20-year period, or whatever the length of the bonds were. A number of years ago, an agreement was struck amongst the town bodies in order to transition from that process to a process of including those paving costs within the annual operating budget. The estimate, Mr. Bartlett, you were at the time, I think, the big proponent of calculating the estimate, was at about $3.5 million per year, which we basically appreciated annually. Okay, and this is the last year of that appreciation, going from 2.5 to 3.5 million, rolling it into the budget, was to account for about, as I recall, 13 to 13 and a half miles of paving of town roads per year. So my first question is, where do we stand? Are we getting that 13 to 13 and a half miles of paving per year?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because again, we do these different procedures, so we are sealing over 13 miles of pavement. But again, when I do the graphs for you, or when I do the worksheets to show you the procedures, I'll try to assign a longevity on those, so you can see for yourself that I may do 6 or 8 miles of an oil and stone application, which by all accounts is unpopular with most residents, but it's the best, least expensive seal in DPW's back pocket, and that's why we've been thick-skinned and keep on doing it. Many residents do not like it, do not want it, but it's a
Well,
necessary evil.
Is it working?
It does work. It does work. It
Because a
seals
lot
the
of residents
pavement.
would say it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the problem? They're saying it's falling apart, it's not
Well,
holding up?
Yeah, it's falling apart is a funny statement. Chip seal, by its nature, it's an emulsion put onto the pavement, and then they add the stone to be the seal that holds that liquid in place. As cars do turn and stuff, it will scuff, but it's not a failure. That's part of the byproduct of what it does. That does not mean the product failed. We might have to reevaluate some of our applications in terms of the roads selected, because maybe certain roads, if it's a cul-de-sac and there's a lot of turning, more chances of it pulling up, so therefore the residents view it as a failure. But we believe it works, and again, maybe just a little more due diligence in terms of our selection, but I think it works. We've been a couple years now into the micro seal, which is a step up from the chip seals. This way the people don't end up with the stone and see the emulsion on those hot summer days, but that itself is a hardened liquid that's fortified with cement, and it will still scuff. So, if a person backs out of their driveway and scuffs the same spots with their wheel.
Scuff mean?
Scuffs mean if you back out of your driveway and you turn the wheel and those front tires turn on the same spot every day, and you're hitting 90, 95 in the morning, and you're turning that tire, you're gonna scuff it. From our perspective, if it stays sealed to the old pavement, the product's working. From a resident's perspective, because now cosmetically it doesn't look as good, they say it's a failure. It's not a failure. Far from a failure. If it breaks the bond to the old road, then it's a failure. But we don't see that happening with our micro seals.
And in my 27 years with 4 other towns, we didn't have the luxury, you can't just pave, you just can't financially afford it. So you have to use your mixed bag, your toolbox to,
So we're using 3 or 4 different procedures now.
Oh, maybe even 5.
5.
Yeah, we'll do mill and fills, chip seals. Mill and fills, again, you're profiling the road, taking down the old asphalt,
Yeah.
putting on the new, which we love the most. It's the easiest, but it's the most costly, because the asphalt's the single most expensive component of any of our road work.
Oil-based, right?
Right. Now, when I say things like cold in place, CIPR, what now technology is allowing us to do is we could take that old road, let's say it's a 5-inch road, we take 5 inches of asphalt, instead of milling 2 off, putting 2 on, maintaining the 5, but the bottom 3's cracked and gonna reflect through, we're gonna now set our machine to all 5 inches and take it all the way down, redo that 5 inches and compact that on a sub-base. What we tried to do for cost savings is put like a chip seal or a micro seal on that. The real truth is we should take that 5-inch sub-base and then put like an inch of hot asphalt on top to get the best return in our investment. But again, it's being evaluated. We have now 3 years under our belt in the Queens Grant area, and I encourage people to go up and look at it. You're going to see some scuffing, but I'm sure there's people going to say it failed. But I ran the cost back then of a mill and fill versus the CIPR with the chip seal we put on it. By far, it's lasting 3 years and has the potential to last another 5, 6, 7 years. And for the return on that investment versus a mill and fill, we're thrilled with it.
Okay, thank you. What about, you guys have had a very tough winter. I drove around town today. There's a lot of damage.
Yep.
A lot of curbs have been ripped up, sidewalks damaged, potholes all over the place. What's going to happen this next fiscal year? How are we going to repair that? What's the game plan to repair it? Is that going to impact your 13 miles to get done this next year? What's going on with that? Because it's a mess out there.
Yeah, it's a mess. Again, in fairness, what we will be doing is looking at the procedures we go forward with, and we'll probably, well, I'm sure we'll get the roads fixed, but we might not be doing, the most expensive procedures on each road. But I think when I give you a report, it will give you a better sense of where we are, what it's going to cost, and the roads that are targeted to be done.
And the curbs and things like that, and the school parking lots are a disaster as well. Are you guys doing that as well?
I will do that if the Board of Ed makes a request of us, but at this point, they haven't. Certainly in less damaged winters, they've requested us to pitch in. I would certainly look at what they have, and if we're going to be doing a lot of extruded concrete curb to repair ours, and they have a few schools in the area, put them right in at the same time.
I'm just concerned if you don't, you're going to have a lot of trip and fall cases on your legal bill, because there's a heck of a lot of damage out there around schools.
Yeah. On our town roads, we've been repairing the curbing as we speak. We've been pretty aggressive at doing that. And one of the things we're going to attempt hopefully with our NEMO FEMA claim, is all the damage that occurred to the curbing and some pavement that got scraped up because there were loaders on the road. Well, that was, we feel that's a direct effect of Storm Nemo. So we're going to, at least attempt to, because we're getting good at the FEMA procedure, we're going to attempt to write that up as a
There's always a silver
project.
lining, isn't there?
We're on camera here, Joe.
Yeah. Couple other items. Tree service, tree trimming and all that. I had occasion back in the hurricane and all that, to talk to some of the tree service people that were around. And they talked about how densely foliage was around town. And that was part of the problem related to the power lines and things like that. Do we have a go-forward plan on tree service, particularly around power lines and all that? I know that has to be coordinated with the utility companies. I know they have an obligation there, but I get asked repeatedly by that, and quite frankly, I get a lot of complaints from constituents that have seen a lot of trees around town with tags on them to say they're supposed to come down, and they've been there 8, 9, 12 months
Legit.
not coming down. And in the last storm, lots of branches down from those dead trees that haven't been ripped out yet. And again, I think of the insurance and the liability and what we're doing on that. So what's going on there?
Well, again, it's a fair point. If you back it up to pre-Sandy, we were probably a good 12 to 15 months behind in trimming. And then everything we've done since Sandy and the nor'easter has been just in response to Sandy and the nor'easter. We haven't cut into our backlog. That's why the numbers are reflecting what they are in contractual services. And the plan is to get back to more normalcy and get caught up on those trees.
But I'm just saying that I don't think the normalcy was good.
I think the normalcy is good, but again, this is part of our cost-effective, well, let me explain it, and then we can argue whether you think it's good or not.
I'm not going to argue.
No, but I think once I give you a better understanding of it, inevitably, we can prove that all the calls ramp up as soon as the leaves pop out. So all of a sudden, we go from a delta of we've caught up in the winter, and here comes May, leaves coming out, calls all go up. The thought is, and we've been successful in years past, is that we would then focus on our tree crew with a contractor to support to get us through spring and summer. By fall, shift resources from parks and highways as their work is diminishing, put them into trees. Therefore, we run the spike in spring and summer of the amount of complaints, catch up every fall, winter. And it's been proven. I could show you 1,200 tickets in 1 year, down to none, the next spring. But this year, and probably even the last couple of years, because if you really look at it historically, not to bore you, but I'm a geek with the weather, March 13th, 2010 was our first FEMA event, and for the last 3 years, we've had 6 of them. I mean, we haven't gotten out from under it, but prior to it, our plan made great sense. We utilized in-house personnel in the off-season to help catch up with a backlog of tree work, and I think we really ran a minimum exposure because we rate our trees on a 1 to 5 scale. So when you see the sticker, it doesn't tell you if that's the 1 to 5, it just tells you that tree's posted, but trust me, all the ones at the highest priority, they're out of there. The 2s are out of there. We're working on like the 3, 4s, and 5s. I often get a complaint, how come this guy just had his tree posted and it's taken down? Because it was fractured to a point that it's gonna split and land on a house, versus this guy's losing acorns and he wants his tree down. So I think our tree warden does a magnificent job of prioritizing those, and we do that workload in that prioritization. And I'm not making excuses, but I do feel,
I'm
you know,
not,
3
I'm not
years-
besmirching somebody's reputation. I'm
Oh, I-
saying
I-
I know a lot of citizens that would disagree that it's been,
that's fair.
you know.
Well, it's fair because they see a sign on their tree and it hasn't been verbalized to them. See, again, a number 5 to them is a number 1. But to us, when we're looking at the full scope of our exposure and where they are, I have to believe in our system and push the 1s and 2s and get those off the road. Sometimes the 4s and 5s. Now, I'm not arguing that the resident doesn't want to hear that his is a 4 or 5 on the list, but I have to triage.
How about the ones that came down on the utilities? On the, whose responsibility are those?
It's funny you bring that up because, quite frankly, when I talk to Ken Plotko, he tells me the opposite. He says he wished more trees that were posted would fall. He finds that the trees that are posted don't have leaves, so they're not falling. So, I mean, I don't know.
He obviously doesn't handle the insurance claims for the town, does he?
No, he's involved. Trust me. He goes to risk management when they fall. But I think in terms of I think if we take down 500 trees a year, I think you might get, a dozen tree complaints, or not tree complaints, but potential tree suits. But I get it. Maybe we should change the posting procedure to better explain to the residents, because I fully appreciate the fact that once that posting's on, that tree to that resident is a number 1 priority. But from our vantage point, we're looking at all the other hazards, and we're saying that that tree isn't as hazardous as these trees, therefore it's not given that higher designation.
Has the town been sued by any trees coming down on houses from the last few storms that were posted but then fell before they got down?
I don't think we've been sued, but I do think some might have fallen, but.
Yeah, I'd have to check with the town attorney to be sure. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but I would
I've heard tell of
prefer,
that. I don't know whether it's true.
I would prefer to check the list to be sure. I don't mean to make that a blanket statement.
Yeah, no, and it could be, management by rumor. I just bring it up because these are some of the things that I hear constantly. And when we're trying to defend your budget, right?
Right.
This is stuff I hear around town. Hey, this is broken, this is destroyed, this is trashed, and these trees aren't down.
Right.
And these guys want how much of a budget increase and why?
Well, the trees
No,
down
that's
is an
what I hear.
absolute, I mean, the trees as far as with the postings and not being removed, that's a fair point. I mean, that's,
Right.
because we've been more, we were proactive, and now with 3 years of storms, we've become reactive, and basically, I'm ramping up the money to get back into being proactive. It's out of necessity. I mean, I keep on wondering, the next windstorm, what's left to fall, but guess what? 20 trees fall, no, seriously. I would almost bet there's nothing left to fall, and guess what? 20 trees are falling the next windstorm. Sorry.
All right, what else? Does anybody have any other items right now? Yes, Mary, please.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on the paving. One thing that I've been noticing is that when the utilities do work on the roads, they're often left in poor condition. And I wanted to know a little bit of how you coordinate with that, and what happens like after the winter, like on Bronson Road, where their repair work has now sunken in, and it's quite bumpy to drive along it for a long length of road.
Right. You want me to take it?
Sure.
Okay. There are trench specifications that we have, and it allows, and it's mostly utilities, I hate to say it, we have more authority and a better handle on John Doe, the excavator that's putting in a sewer for a private residence. When it comes to the gas company, they can pretty much, well, number one, they have the permits to dig on an emergency basis 24/7, regardless if we just pave a road. If there's a report of a gas leak, they have that permission. But the thing we're trying to do, I guess the shortest answer I can give you, is we're trying to enforce those guidelines more strict, and their counter complaint back to us is, how do you expect us to restore a trench in good order in the winter when hot asphalt isn't available? Our counter argument to them is, do better work so it doesn't settle, so that you don't have to go out there and restore it. So it's been, but what we did do just the last couple of weeks, revoked all gas company permits with the exceptions of emergencies, got their attention, brought them to a screeching halt. They're in town the last week, fixing things up for us. So it's been a little bit of a fight, but we're winning it.
All right, thank you. Keep at it.
We're trying. And if you don't know, the reason the gas company is, right now, everybody's shifting from oil because of the economy, so therefore, we give them our paving list, but we have no right to tell the gas company, we paved our road, and turn away their business. So if there's 40 houses on a road, and we just paved it last week, and 10 of those people want to go to gas, we're going to have 10 gas trenches on that new road.
They've been aggressive extending their mains too, as you probably know, driving around town.
Right. Do you give residents notice we're going to come and pave your road in 6 months if you want, or?
What we really do is give the utilities that notice, and they're supposed to go at that neighborhood with a marketing campaign, and they tell me that they're doing that, and then inevitably, by the time the neighbors get together and who's going to pay for what and who wants to do it, we'll have the road resurfaced, and then they'll come in and do their work after the fact. We even proposed a moratorium that didn't fly with the Department of Public Utilities, but we were going to rate our pavements. If you, as a gas company, dug in a pavement that was 0 to 5 years old, the restoration fee was X. If it was 6 to 10 years old, it dropped down a little. If it was 11 to 15, but the Department of Public Utilities said, you can't do that. It's the same cost to restore the trench, you can't. But our claim was, hey, they're killing our new roads. We're fighting like heck to get new roads, and they come in. I think the argument is we have to enforce the trench specs more aggressively. That's where I think the fight's going to end up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then I think, Mr. DeWitt, you had your hand up.
Just a quick, good evening, gentlemen. You mentioned before the repair of building and grounds. We don't have the detailed list of what that is, right? Is that correct? That's not in here. It is? Oh, in the big text report. Oh, okay, I'll take a look at that. Communication. So every year we seem to talk about cell phones. I think we talked about it the other night in two-way radios, and we have the ECC buying radios, Arrays buying radios. But your radios are obviously not on emergency frequencies, right?
Correct.
Well, not so.
But I mean, you have to talk to the fire department and, right?
Right. Yeah, the ECC overrides all of us. They override PD, fire, DPW. So
Right.
in these storms, they will call. ECC to DPW, and depending the nature of the call, they might have a specific truck to be told to call or a general call out, and a foreman will take that call and dispatch the men accordingly. But
Okay.
we interlink.
Okay, but the frequency you were referring to before that you're being taken off of is a communications frequency just between your own guys, right?
Yeah, all, and this is the bandwidth, so everybody that has a radio license, no matter who you are, before you had 50 bandwidth units.
Yes,
Because there's too many of them, they're shrinking everybody in half. You only have 25.
right.
So a lot of your old radios, anything older than 5 years old, has to be reprogrammed.
Oh, because they're just tightening up the
Correct.
bandwidth.
They're making them skinnier, narrower bandwidths for each of the users. So us, like everybody else, falls under that.
Got it. Okay, I'm just getting to this 530. Thank you.
And if I might add, just selfishly, and believe me, the guys don't like to do it, but we're better off with the radios. They're a lot cheaper than the cell phones, and it becomes information broadcast so the whole department hears it. Nothing's more frustrating when a foreman's calling a guy on the phone, they know about that conversation. When a radio call goes across, all district foremen hear it, all the men hear it, and believe me, it makes the operation flow a lot smoother. So I would respectfully request we don't cut that, because I think that's the smarter way to continue.
No, understand. The real heart of my question is, so it's 29,996. How much of that is getting new radios, and how much of that is your cell phone contract?
Just from rough numbers here, I would say we're looking at about 16,000 is towards the trucks, or the radio upgrade. The other 13,500 is the...
Oh, it says here, 15 cell phones, 13.5.
There you go.
All right.
So I'm just deducting the balance to mean those are the radio upgrades. I'm sure a percentage of that is repair as well.
Got it. You mentioned FEMA before. Are any of your hours FEMA reimbursable, like the fire, we talked to fire and police department? Do you have reimbursable hours as well? Or just
I'm
more
not sure what they
labor and
told you,
material?
but here's the deal with FEMA as it relates to a snowstorm. You're given a lockdown.
Or
period.
Sandy, anything kind
Okay,
of
Sandy,
curious.
we are getting 30 hours at straight-time labor, first time ever, actually, because of the impact of the storm. It's kind of funny, you got to follow the FEMA guidelines. They tell you 30 consecutive straight-time labor. Well,
Days.
there aren't 30 consecutive straight-time days.
Right.
So in essence, it boils down to like 24 by the time you back out weekends.
Sure.
But we are getting that from Sandy. The snowstorm is actually more challenging in the sense that they give you a 48-hour window. The legislation is going to try to get a 72-hour window. The challenges we're going to have is how best to deploy that 48 or 72 hours, because we have the right to start it later in the storm or right off the bat.
Oh, sure.
But what our challenge is, we shot out of the gate with in-house services, we have overtime bills, we have material bills. Then as the storm worsened, we inherit more contractors' bills, but
Sure,
when you look at the
backhoes are
overall
coming later,
spread,
right?
it's not 48 to 72 hours, it's realistically 96 plus. And go back to your point about the curbing, it's eligible if we pick the right block, that curbing becomes eligible, because that's part of the puzzle. So once we know what the 48 or 72 hours we're going to be, or, if it's going to be 48 or 72, we'll take a look at everything that took place and where our best return is, not only from DPW, but factoring in fire, police, Board of Ed. Board of Ed has a huge risk because we gambled their facilities to do the roads, and now basically left their facilities for last, so they might fall outside the window and have a pretty big invoice to pick up at the end.
Sure. And back to this maintenance repair, I see bleacher, is any of this FEMA reimbursable? No. Because I know there's the Smith Richardson garage, furnace, sorry. I know something at Smith Richardson was blown down by the storm, one of the storms.
Yeah, that's correct. We have a $12,000 fee for the repair of a house that was hit by a tree, yes.
So, because it's funny, because when the fire department says building and grounds, they mean their building and grounds. When you say building and grounds, you mean everybody's building. Because I was going to say, what does that really mean? Does that just mean the one-rod highway, but that means everything?
Yeah, what it really means is my poor guys are like the shoemaker's son. They don't have any shoes. Our garage is, no, really,
Yeah.
we're kind of But, yeah, it's everything we maintain.
Got it.
In the infrastructure.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Brockville?
Thanks. Scotty, if we go back, a couple of questions back, you said something that just hit me. How aggressively, Mr. Walsh was asking you, was talking in the context of the difficult environment we have, and I think it's not a secret that he's probably going to be asking that same question to almost everybody who's going to be coming before us, because there's obviously a push on to see where we can economize. The question I have for you is, you said that one option, if you were forced to look at your budget again, would be to ask for a more aggressive volunteerism from people who use the town's facilities, such as, use ball fields as an example with some of the leagues, right?
Correct.
And I think that's an excellent point that you brought up that I think doesn't only involve your department, but I can think of a whole range of other areas. How aggressively do we ask people? In other words, the town, and rightfully so, provides lots of services that, taken individually, benefit, in some cases, a very small number of people, in some cases, a larger number, but very few of the services outside of police, fire, school, so forth, benefit 58,000 people, right? And that's fine. We provide lots of services. Golfers, there's some number of golfers, there's some number of boaters, there's some number of little leaguers, right? But it seems to me that going forward, one of the ways we might be able to reduce some of our expenses would be to ask people who are benefiting, targeted groups that are benefiting from town-wide expense to pitch in more. And I can think of a whole range of things I won't bring up now. But but specifically to you, it seems to me that it would be appropriate, even before we look at potential budget costs, that if a Little League, I think it would be excellent, to tell you the truth. We all talk about our grandparents walking uphill to school, both 5 miles both ways. I don't think it'd be so terrible if the players on Little Leagues knew that they had to put an hour in a week, helping to clean the field or whatever it might be, so they can enjoy that and be able to have their activities. So what would your answer to me be in terms of how aggressively do we ask them to make that contribution?
I don't know that we ask them aggressively, but I will tell you this. In the last few years, we've secured what we call a job box at the back of every backstop, and in there we give the various leagues the access to that job box. What's in there are rakes, Turfus, which is an agent that dries the clay for them to play. One of the downfalls, probably slight because it can be trained, but one of the downfalls is the leagues and their enthusiasm that they game in will rake the clay onto the grass. And now what they've done effectively is they've played ball that day because they removed that clay and dried up that water. But instead of having a 2-inch hole that was holding water, when they removed it, they made it a 4-inch hole. So I get rain 2 days later, and now I'm out there adding clay. And worse than that, I'm trying to restore the grass edge by taking the clay that's killing the grass back onto the field. But I think, to answer your question, the leagues are willing to do it because the biggest impact we have is rain, and even if I put X amount of personnel out there, there's only so many fields you can get to in a timely manner for them to start at 8 or 9 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday morning. So we can visit it more aggressively, but I think we would have to. I definitely have a fear of how their technique would have to be tightened up.
I hear you. Let me just follow up on that. So you used it's a step in the right direction, but you described sort of like a like a box, like sometimes when you go and you buy fruit on the side of a road and, way up in the countryside, there's a box, on your honor system, you should pay for it. I mean, that's wonderful, but that wouldn't work at Walmart, for example, right? I mean, they need a cashiers. So I guess my question is, so at this point you're saying we're asking folks to pitch in, right? That's what I'm hearing from you.
I think it's a combination. We're not asking as much as they are saying to us, what can we do to help with the field? Some teams get guideline in those same job boxes, and they'll put down their lines because let's face it, again, as parts of cuts, we were rolling crews on Saturdays because it was time and a half. We cut back on Sundays. Well, if you were the team that drew the Sunday game, you think DPW stinks because there's never good lines and there's always, bumps in the field. So then we said, hey, the best we could do is if you guideline, here's a spreader, and they would start off their Sunday morning lining for those games. But to the league's credit, they've been fairly aggressive. Our problem is it's not an annual, it's an annual learning curve because people learn it with Little Johnny when they're in Little League, but then they're moving on to Babe Ruth or on to this one. And most of their focus is on the moment, not on what they're creating for the rest of the day.
I don't mean to, I'm sorry.
Ken, let's go to Rob?
I have something directly on point on this, actually. Having coached the Little League for 11 seasons, I can tell you that certainly in the National League, the National Little League, and I would imagine the American Little League, the coaches and parents put in an inordinate amount of time on field maintenance after each and every game. We tamp down the area around home plate. We will do the foul lines when necessary. We will cover the field with tarps so that when it rains, it doesn't flood out the pitcher's mound and the batter's box area. When you have the last game on a Saturday, we're told you're responsible for getting that field, properly buttoned up so that if there is a rainstorm or something, that, it's not going to be bad for play the next day. We even take out hoses and hose down the infield in order to keep all the sand from kicking up. So I can certainly tell you from a Little League perspective, and with having personal experience with this, the coaches in the leagues do an awful lot in terms of field maintenance on a daily basis. The town does what they can. They do a great job with the grass cutting and getting the fields ready for play on the weekend. But in terms of just ongoing what they do an awful lot. So that already is going on. It's a fair point and a good point. But just so you know, it does go on a daily basis, at least with Little League baseball.
And I appreciate that. I guess well, first of all, I only picked on Little League because that's what Scott used as an example. So I can think of a whole range of
So it's your
serv-
fault,
I
Mr.
can
Bartlett.
think of- No, I can think of a whole range of services where, I guess I would just say that I would suggest to the First Selectman, to you, that maybe on a proactive basis, we should be much, I think a topic going forward is going to be a lot of services we provide to select group of residents, and whether or not we're pricing it properly, whether or not it necessarily is something we should be doing in the first place. That's my opinion, I think, going forward, and it's not just your department by any
No, I
means.
understand.
But I would start at not asking for help and volunteerism, but I would move to a expectation of that in return for the services we're providing to a, in some cases small, in some cases medium-sized cohort that are using, services from the entire town. So I think it's great, Mr. Bolito, maybe that could be a model, actually, based on everything he described. It sounds like they are doing a fair
Yeah,
bit.
the only small caveat, Mr. Bolito brought up excellent points, but when he refers to like the tarp on the pitching rubber, when there's a field designated for the National Little League, they have the right to do that. But when I have a field that serves as a park, I can't do that because it's girls' Little League that's using it Saturday night, and it's men's softball Sunday morning, and it's co-ed Sunday night. So unless the facility's locked down to a single usage, then you're right, you have that exclusionary right. But I would have complaints from residents who want to go play ball if I cover other fields. So I just want to be clear that certain fields can have the right to have coverage, most unfortunately cannot. Because you can't literally take it away from other users, is my point, unless it's a sole,
All right.
single-use facility.
Mrs. Albin?
I think this is an interesting topic. It's slightly off the dollar signs that sit before us and what we would be looking at. But I think it is a topic that I believe the First Selectman has mentioned before. He was going to establish some sort of committee, were we correct in hearing that, to look at these sorts of items in town services? And I think it's a bigger discussion that belongs at a different table. I would also caution that when it would be wonderful to have volunteerism in a lot of ways in town, and I would also caution we live in a very litigious society. So when we ask people to do certain things, we'd want to be certain that those are things that they can safely do, number one. Number two, that the things they're doing don't end up, as Scott has mentioned to us, end up costing us more money in that they have to restore whatever potential, not damage, but disruption to the facilities. So there's a number of things I think that would have to be looked at in looking to have that kind of volunteerism happen. It starts out sounding really good, and you can then watch it turn into something else that you regret.
Mr. Walsh?
Ms. Alvin, I hear what you say, and I heard about the First Selectman's Committee that he's going to set up, but unfortunately, that's going to be a little bit too little, a little bit too late for me, because I'm going to need to make cuts that are going to be coming into place July 1st that these gentlemen are going to have to manage to. There's not going to be any time for some public committee to sit here for weeks and months and generate a nice report on recommendations. These cuts are going to have to come into play July 1st, and these guys are going to have to start, even with the paving, as you said, July 1st, make decisions about how much asphalt you're going to start placing orders and be in competition with the other towns on how much you're placing your orders for. So there's really not going to be any time for any of the cuts we make into this budget for any nice committee to sit here and try to manage to, because that might be nice for the next budget, but if there's going to be changes and large cuts that are made to this budget to make it a more reasonable budget, these guys and other department heads are going to need to make those decisions. And we and the Board of Selectmen and the RTM are going to start making cuts to specific lines. And that's one of the reasons I'm asking some of these department heads for what areas they would see to cut, because we're going to have to start making cuts to specific line items that go into place in about 3 months.
Now, Scott mentioned something to me that maybe I'll bring up this time. As we talked about the storms previously, the effects of Sandy and Nemo. And one of the items that, when we come to the end of this fiscal year, as we get approached, one of the things we'll have to do is balance our budget. So just like the challenges that you face about where to get the money, well, to balance the current fiscal year's budget, one of the items that we may have to forego on, we still have about 600,000 plus left in the paving account from last year. But one of the things we may have to forego to balance the current year's fiscal budget, depending on as we get closer to the finish line, is forego some of that paving that was planned for this current fiscal year, which makes a cut of the next year's one even more of a hit.
And I guess that becomes a balancing act with your budget. Just like I was talking to Scott about the fact that previous bodies in this town have cut your equipment purchases way back, and at some point you do need a dump truck. You can cut it every year for 3 years until it finally just doesn't work and you need a dump truck. But at some point, the same thing happens with the paving. And unfortunately, I don't think want to get to the point where we're cutting back on paving this year, next year, because we're going to end up in the same situation where we're bonding paving again.
Right.
I mean, it seems like a nice, easy account if we give you a cut to just cut it. But unfortunately, and then that's where you guys have to prioritize, and with the administration.
Just, further on the dump truck analogy, we have some dump trucks that are, if a dump truck is 15 years old, the value of that dump truck is, pick a value, $12,000, $14,000. Well, in a given year, we could spend $8,000 into that $12,000 dump truck. We're almost putting more money into it to keep it on the road than the net value of the piece of equipment. So.
Yeah. And that's the difficulty you're going to have with the pile of money we give you, is how to manage to it, I guess.
Oh, basically.
Yeah.
Mrs. Albin, did you have a follow-up comment?
Yes, Mr. Walsh, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. My comments were, I don't expect that we're going to have any magic answers before we have to deal with this budget. Those are not my comments. I think that all I'm saying is, if someone is going to look at services in that kind of detail, which I don't think this board can do, we are going to have to look at dollars and cents and what we can afford to give each and every department this April 2nd in order to do the job that they will do for the town in the next fiscal year. We're all struggling with that at this table as we study this budget. But when somebody does look at services, I just wanted to comment that it would be wonderful to have a lot of things that we could have done in this town done by volunteers that has its own inherent set of problems. That was my comment.
Thank you. A quick question for you, since you brought it up. Who's that, Mr. DeWitt? Did you have?
I'll be real quick.
Yeah.
So, I think this is my 5th or 6th budget, and I always go right to capital. But you know what? I think I finally learned this year that is not the right thing to do. But you know what? It would really be helpful for me, an engineer number guy, right, to know by asset how many hours maintenance spends on it. So you got that dump truck that, is 2 years old and we spend 2 hours a year maintaining it. You got the one that's 10 years old and we're spending 200 hours. and this guy's making $50,000, he's probably spending half of his life working on that dump truck. That, for me, would be a little more compelling case, just, you know, not that I'm in the mode of capital cutting anymore, to be perfectly honest with you, but that, you know, we keep saying it. This is the first year I'm really hearing it, I think, but I think it would really be helpful to see by asset how much you're spending on it.
You made that note? Yep.
Thank you.
Mrs. Leclerc?
I just have a question on the capital budget. In prior years, we used to have like a priority number for each item, and that's not in our budget book this year. And so I was wondering if we could get that.
I believe that's also in the backup.
That's in the backup?
No, they're not numbered, but they are in priority order.
Okay.
Right, they're in the order as the priority. Mrs. Leclerc, you set?
Yep.
You want to see that?
Quick, and I don't want to belabor this any
Oh, it's
longer.
in here.
Mr. Michelangelo, you said something interesting. Yeah. Said a lot interesting, but you said something particularly interesting to me just a couple minutes ago. You talked about $600,000 left over from prior year for paving,
Yep.
right? So that was from 2012.
No, and so in the current year budget, you know, the one we're in now are, let's see.
Right here, 600.
Okay. So, yeah, so we had 2.5 million
Right.
appropriated this year. So thus far, we spent 1.8 million of it.
Okay.
1.88 million. So there's 618,000.
So that's what you're talking about. You're talking the year-to-date. You're not saying that there was an allotment last year that was not worked through.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep, so,
You're talking that you have $600,000 available for this spring
That's it.
correct.
in this account.
Yeah.
And that what you're saying is you might have to back that off in order to balance your budget due to some of the overages
You got it.
incurred for other items.
You nailed it.
Yep.
Every once in a while, a light bulb goes off.
Boom.
So, yeah.
Touchdown.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. I'll echo what has been said to you, and thanking you and everyone in the department for the work you've done. And this is more of a comment as opposed to a question, but the tree conversation, I think, is what really brought it home for me. And I think that everyone at this table and those who aren't here tonight, as well as the RTM members, do listen carefully to what is said on every side of the issue. And certainly, the issue of cost is one that we will be talking about here. But when we look at that, I guess just to name, you're talking about the tree prioritization and managing with what you are given. This year, you were given by Mother Nature a couple of storms that have put you in a position that has, you know, you're kind of behind the eight ball on some of those things as a result. Cuts to your budget requests will mean that you will need to continue to prioritize the services that you provide. And the tree program is one, the beach combing you talked about. I know we certainly had complaints from folks last summer. I remember receiving them, and I think some members of the Board of Finance, as well as RTM, did as well. So I think that for all of us here at these tables, it's important that we, in my opinion, support you as we look forward to any cuts that get made to this budget. Help the people of the town understand that that is the reality, that we can't have every service that we desire in the time that we want to, that we do respect your management and prioritization, working with the first selectman and other department heads in order to do that. So just naming that reality, again, I think these are worthwhile conversations, and they're conversations that we have to have. I think, you know, Mr. Walsh's point earlier, I think it's helpful for us to have them here so that we understand and can clearly communicate with the people of the town where we're going and what we are and aren't able to do. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I think one thing that would be helpful is, to the extent that you have those policies on prioritization and things like that, I think instead of just sharing them with us, maybe you share them with the public so that they understand them a little bit better. Because I don't think the public sees what happens on a day-to-day basis,
I hear that, yeah.
and they react to what they see or don't see within their own neighborhoods.
Well, they react to their perception, because I agree with you, Tom. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, if I had a placard in front of the tree, in front of my house, and it's dated 6 months ago, I want to know, why didn't I get my tree removed? But unfortunately, you know, I can show you, and we'll make the list and show you how many trees on priority 1 were removed, 2, and I can show you by date which ones jumped on the list ahead of a 3, 4, or 5 based on its, you know, condition. But I'll
It's
do
not
that
explained.
homework, and I'll try to, I don't know how much it will help, because again, I think a resident, once that placard's on their tree, you know, is going to feel like it's the highest priority, because in their world, it is.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll go to the public. Questions, comments from the public on this budget? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen, on the Public Works budget. Let's take about a 5-minute recess, and then we'll go on and we'll do the building department, because this is going pretty quickly, okay? So we'll do 5 minutes, and then we'll do building.
I know a lot of reports.
Are we all set? All right, I'm going to call the board back into order. Everyone? All right, next up is Department Number 5050, the Building Department. Mr. Gillerin, welcome.
Good evening. I'm Jim Gillerin, for I think almost everybody should know. If you've been here for the last 15 years.
You're a legend.
But basically, the building department service description is, we're in charge of building alterations, improvements of every single building in town except ones that are federally owned.
How many structures is that about?
28, approximately 28,000 single and two-family homes and 2,800 commercial buildings.
So roughly 30,000 properties.
Yeah, roughly 30,000.
Your budget this year was $728,156, and the request before us is $738,001, or a 1.4 percentage point increase year over year.
Mm-hmm.
What changes year over year?
What changes is the request for a second full-time secretary, which actually was in last year's budget, but went bye-bye with the contingency. And so it's back again this year. I have one woman working in the office doing the work of two for the last 2 years. And it's not fair to her, it's not fair to the people that she's working for, and so that's why the request is in there. We actually had a 0.4% help. I had a person in there for the morning stance of the telephones, but we definitely need the full-time person. This year, not just this year, last year with the hurricane, this year with the hurricane, with the snowstorms, I printed up some numbers last year, the differences between last year and this year, and this is just to give you an idea. It's not going to be a reoccurring thing, but just from Storm Sandy, we are $500,000 ahead in revenue from where we were last year at this time. And that's basically almost all storm-related. So
And that's in revenue, that's in fees and permits.
that's in permit fees.
And we'll get to revenue. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do want to go to the revenue line items. Let's stick with expense for right now.
Okay, expense for the
Did you have some turnover in building inspectors? Because I noticed that salaries went down in that line item, or what am I missing there?
Yeah, the salaries went down in that particular line item. I have a new building inspector who will be starting as soon as I finish doing the interviews to replace George Rappa, who retired but last September. And he will be starting at a lower grade than Mr. Rappa.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, he was my assistant building official. So the inspector that comes in as a building inspector, not as my assistant.
Are you going to be, and I can't remember, are you going to be over budget this year due to all the work related to Sandy and all that?
I don't think so.
So we're going to get the $500,000 in additional revenue, but there's no overtime or expense. Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at you. Where do they?
Yeah, there is expense. I mean, the overtime and pretty much FEMA took care of
It is?
the majority of that.
Well, again, this is part of the variance analysis that we've been working on as we discussed, but no, there's certainly, and those guys were, it was amazing because I was in the same building, but I wasn't working as hard as those guys. A lot of hours put in over there. 75% of those hours will be recaptured, 25, theoretically.
Right.
25% will not. That's
Okay, but they
part of
are
the
over
analysis.
budget right now due to the
Yeah.
storm-related
Right.
items. That's- I wanted to confirm
Yeah.
that, that's all I was doing. Okay. Can we turn to questions from board members on the operating budget? Mr. Brockfeld, please.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry. Sorry, Jerry. A new secretary, $41,000?
Yes.
Does that include benefits and all the sundry expenses? Or is that just a salary, and then we have to?
Yeah, that's the total. What I did, I had the secretary,
Wait a minute, I'm getting conflicting.
That's just
The health insurance cost is about 22,000, so that's
Oh, and
not,
I know, right.
yeah, so no, that's,
No, but the 40,000 is not, to answer Mr. Brockfeld's question, the 40,955 is only compensation, it is not benefits.
Yeah, there's as Mr. Gillern indicated, though, he had a .4, so the .4 goes away, so there's an offset to the 40 of the 22,000.
Sure, it was just, the
I
question was
understand
one
that, but
person.
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry, Tom. So Linda, what would the estimate be, if you hire somebody with a $41,000 salary, what's the actual cost to the town of bringing that person on board? Guesstimate. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just, a round
Well, you got to
number.
understand that you're also offsetting 40% of the health insurance. Do you know what I mean? Because you have.
No, I don't get it.
Okay. If you
the
were
other
talking-
employee was not part-time. They were part-time in this department, but was a full-time person shared.
Right.
So the salary was shared as well as the benefit package was shared.
But he's not asking for the offsets, all he's saying is how much does one new employee cost? And the answer based on
I'm guessing it's
other
somewhere in the
analysis is
mid-60s or something.
60,000, 60-some-odd thousand.
Right, is the only other cost, well, yeah,
No, you'll have, if you look at
You'll have
the top 4 or
FICA,
5
you'll have all
lines,
sorts.
Social Security, that type of thing would
Right.
also
Right.
be added in there.
that's why I was just
Right.
curious if there was a.
It'll come to like
a guess-
65,000.
no, it has to be less than that, because if you look, under the personnel summary, my secretary B, which is the one secretary that I have full-time, makes a total of $56.95 a year. That's with longevity, and that's her total salary.
No, I-
I lowered the grade of that secretary from a grade 5. I had 2 5s. I lowered the grade to a grade 3.
No, I understand, Jim. I think we're just talking past each other. I understand that, I mean, that 56,000 also isn't the total compensation either. I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong here. I'm just trying to get an idea of,
No, but if you're looking at salaries, it's $11,000 or $15,000 less for this one than if I had hired another one.
All right, one employee at $41,000, you take about 7% in your taxes, and that is about $6,000 you take based on $22,000 to $23,000 of which they kick in. You say it's $20,000, you're coming up to $67,000 per person.
Gotcha. That,
Out of
you know where I'm trying to go with this. I just think it's important for the board, and I don't think anything deceptive is being done or hidden. I just think it's important for the board to understand it's a $70,000 expense to add somebody, not a $41,000 expense. That's all I'm trying to point out.
Yep.
And that goes for every employee, right? I'm not singling out this employee. We have, but it's just, 41 sounds like one thing and 70 sounds like something else. So I just think we should be aware of it, that's all.
And again, to Mr. Gilleran's point, that's without the offsets of the
Without
other
the offset of
person
the
and all that.
0.4, I
That's just a
understand.
gross
Yeah.
cost, which is where you were going.
Yeah,
Mr.
if I'm,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Mr.
just with respect to this particular, I mean, there's two sets of questions here.
Yep.
How much does a $40,000 person add with salary, pension?
All in, right.
All in, Social Security,
Right.
Medicare, et cetera. With respect to the TPC in the building, the pro staffing, there's basically a shared person, TPC building. Currently, the total current FTE, a little redundancy there, but currently, the FTE for those two departments is 12.6. The going forward proposed FTE with this change is 13.0. So the net between the two departments is a plus .4. And there's no additional full-time people. So the total net change to the town budget is $13,000, that's including regular payroll, health insurance, and Social Security.
Right, because the person already exists.
I appreciate that. That's a good point. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Mr. Walsh and then Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Mr. Gilleran, first of all, I think it's a great way that you were able to add that new person. It's been needed for years, to be quite honest with you. I talked about this last year. We tried to fund it in a way where we put it into contingency with the thought that you were going to have that person, and then all of a sudden that contingency got caught at the last minute, and your person was, unfortunately a sacrifice in that, and no one knew what was, and a lot of people who cut that contingency didn't even exactly understand what was, that person was being sacrificed. You are in a money-generating department, correct?
Correct.
And you need money to be able to run that department, correct, in order to generate that profit. I've been asking others before, and you probably heard the conversation I had with the Public Works Department. Your department's a little bit interesting because if I ask you to tell me how, if we cut your budget, how you would be affected or what services you would cut back on, it seems to me as though you really can't cut back on services because you have to issue building permits if someone comes in and rightfully has the right to get a building permit, correct?
Right, we have to, I mean, I have to have the right number of people for the amount of work that's being generated. Right at the moment, I mean, at this time of the year, we've already done over where am I? I was just looking for the number. $106 million worth of, $106 million worth of building has been done in the town, this year since July, which generated $1.3 million in revenue. We're far, I mean, spring is coming, and we're a long ways from,
Yep.
the end of fiscal year.
But if I asked you
Like
how
I
you...
said, it's not going to be carried forward unless we get some big projects. I don't know what projects are coming. Half the time they get stuck in planning and zoning, they get stuck in conservation. Before they get to me, I have no idea, and I've been asked many, many times, well, how much money are you going to make this year? I don't have a crystal ball, is the same answer I've been giving for the last 15 years.
But in order to make this tax increase more affordable, to cut it, and we were to impact your department at all, and I ask you what services are going to be cut back, you can't cut back on services because it's just the amount of building permits that people apply for. I guess the best you could do is say we'd have less personnel and people just have to wait a lot longer. Things wouldn't get done, inspections wouldn't get done, people would be waiting months for inspections to get done and not moving forward with their project. Is that what you're telling me? While they're paying the same amount of money, that...
Yeah, well, you've brought in projects. Would you
Yes.
like to wait longer for
No.
them? Okay, thank you.
So I guess it's a long way of saying it's a
and
hard
Mike
department
wouldn't
to
want
be
to
able
get the phone calls that I send down to him when the people complain either.
I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is an interesting department on how do you cut back? Say we wanted to make the decision, it's really not for you to say whether we cut back. You still get permits in, and it's not, you're not bringing the permits in, others are bringing them in. It's just more, it would take a lot longer to get inspections done, projects wouldn't get done on time,
Correct.
and it might impact whether people want to do business in this town.
Well, I mean, the faster the job gets done, too, the more money the tax assessor get, or,
True.
the tax collector gets.
True.
So, I mean, I don't think holding up jobs any longer than they get held up between P and Z and conservation is a good thing to do.
Mr. Walsh, if I might just add on to that point, the point you made is what I'll call for a typical construction job. I think that Mr. Giller and his department, over time, also have faced projects that have specific deadlines. Be that a school project trying to open up by the first day of school, be that our public schools, or in some cases, the universities getting done in time for their school. So there's sometimes he has deadlines that are beyond just, hey, we'll get it done next week if we don't get it done this week. And he and his
That
department have done a
happens
great
every-
job of managing to those schedules over time.
It happens every year. The universities will wait till the last minute, and or the schools, our Board of Education, and they'll come in around May or June and, say, we need this job finished so the school can open in September. What are you doing? And you see some of the jobs, it's going to be overtime hours, it's going to be, and, it turns into a whole bunch of more work, just for those few projects as the rest of the construction in town goes on. And the schools, of course, always think they're a priority. Schools have to be done, well, the person wants to move into his house, too,
Ann, are you done?
Well, one last thing. So there's an additional cost of the waiting, too. I mean, obviously, the commercial businesses have certain amounts of money to put into a project. If they're not opening a business to generate money, like some of the restaurants, some of the other merchants in town, and their projects are taking because of inspection issues and whatever, and you have less personnel or something else like that, and it's an extra month, that might be a month that they don't have built into their business plan, which is going to negatively impact them and how they can run their business. Same thing
Absolutely.
for the residential clients.
Absolutely.
Who may be predicting that they're going to be in their house by, say, September 1st, with their kids in school by a certain period of time.
Yeah,
And that
and-
project gets
and-
put off or delayed because of some personnel issues. It might not be until October, and that's an extra month rental someone has to pay someplace else.
Right, and their mortgages, too. I've got, hurry up, I need to see whether the house is finished or not. My mortgage rate's going to go up, if I don't get it done, you don't get it done by next Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. I vaguely remember the conversation last year about secretary, right? Mm-hmm. So the lady is currently shared by TP&Z and you, 60/40, right? What was? Oh, it's you. I'll be much more careful. I'll be much more careful now. That lovely lady that I see every time I go in the building department is shared 60/40, right? The proposal last year was to go full-time building and then a full-time person in TPZ. Is that correct?
Right, she's going to go back to TP&Z full-time.
But last year's proposal, just so I'm clear, we were going to go from one person to two people. You were going to go back to TPZ full-time, and a new person would come in and have been in your building department. Is that correct?
Yeah, she'd be full-time, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I'm gonna question your math here. When I look at the TPZ budget, on page 64, it appears as if that .64 lady is further augmented by .4. So it appears as if the budget increase in that, at least in TPZ, is at least 22,000. So I question how you got an overall impact of $13,000.
Linda's got it there. This was discussed, and we...
Because the real extent of the change is, again, just like it was last year.
Right.
You're becoming one whole secretary, and TP&C is getting one new head.
It's a little more than that. This was something that
Yeah, there was
Jim
another-
and Joe brought in and made a joint presentation on, and if Linda has the
Okay.
explanation, I think you can see it a little simpler.
I think it was the loss of a position in planning, or a position that wasn't filled in planning and zoning. It's been funded but hasn't been filled.
Okay.
No, the first selectman budget for TPZ is 489 for regular payroll, 130 for health insurance, is health insurance on this page?
What page are we on, 60-something?
63.
Wait, where's health insurance?
I'm just looking at page 64, where it says Secretary B, .6.
I am looking at the payroll. I'm looking at 3 line items: regular payroll, health insurance, and social security. The
Okay.
change in those 3 line items for these 2 departments for the change in activity is 13,572. Now, that's
But
what
you,
I'm
but you
looking
are
at.
adding one new
Yeah.
head. So if you look at 64, Secretary B, TPZ, .6, that was the .6 to the .4.
That's eliminated.
Right, so that's, well, it's not eliminated.
Yes, it is.
No, it's just added back.
It's headed into this year's budget, plus another 22,182, which is the
sorry, which-
.4 to make that person whole. Right?
Yeah.
If you look at the TPZ line, the bottom line, fiscal year 13 approved, 6.2. Bottom line this year, 6.0.
Look
That's
at
a
the.
negative
So you
look at the
eliminated-
details.
In,
Look at the details, as Mr. DeWitt points out. You have .6, then you add the .4.
6.
Right.
There's 6.0.
But you're also, but what Mr. Mayor's saying, I think, is that we're also eliminating a zoning enforcing officer.
Correct.
Which is an entirely separate thing.
Right.
But that's what you're saying.
Right, but between the two departments, when Josephine goes back full-time in zoning,
Essentially, you're swapping out a zoning enforcement officer for
Full-time
assistant help,
secretary.
secretarial help.
actually less than that, because I'm going to a grade 3 instead of a grade 5.
Whatever,
I
I'm just
mean,
talking about the
the
titles.
change,
Jason, we're
the change
talking-
is, you're losing 38,000 and adding 22, so I understand the head count, right? So, I guess we'll ask TPZ, but he has no more need for this zoning enforcement officer?
You're going to want to have Joe explain that, but no, we do need the zoning enforcement officer. There's a trade-off between a TPZ inspector and the zoning enforcement officer.
Okay.
So let's ask
So
when they
You
get...
want,
So-
you want Mr. Devoncheck to step that,
Yeah.
I'll
Step
I'll
through
make
that
a note
with
of
you.
that. So, I guess I'll say it a different way. If we were really moving .4, .6 of the salary from TPZ to building, and didn't need the zoning enforcement officer, we could be down to 5 people, saying it a different way, right?
Well, there was a reclassification of an inspector to an inspector zoning enforcement officer. So there's a reclassification involved at all with this as well.
Oh, so even better. So the guy went from .6 to 1 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're saying the first line item went to the fourth line item? Isn't that what I missed? You said there was a reclassification that says reclass. We can deal with this with TPZ. I'm okay. I just want to, these seem to be kind of
It's a valid
interlinked, so.
point, Mr. DeWitt.
Yeah, the inspector is 0, the ZEO is 1. So we went from 1 inspector to 1 ZEO.
Actually, you went from 6/10 of an inspector to a full-time inspector.
Secretary.
No, if you look at the
No, you
third-
lost 6/10 of a zoning officer, and now they're calling it 1 head.
Right.
So they've gone up 40%.
No, if you,
In addition, you've gone up 40% in the secretary's budget as well, you're right.
This goes from 1 to 0 to 0, and this goes from 0
I don't
to
want 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm wondering how this math works myself.
Right.
Yeah, no, I will.
Right,
I know he
that's
knows.
what
I
I'm
just wanna- Can I chime in, Mr. DeWitt?
Sure.
I think that what we're seeing here actually is a wonderful example of why it's so impossible to cut budgets in town government, and maybe in corporations as well. To me, the issue of whether or not TPZ is not going to have an inspector has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on whether or not this department needs a full-time secretary. The bottom line is, and I'm not arguing you do or don't, by the way, I'm really not. I have no idea what you need. The bottom line is that we're hiring a full-time secretary at something like $70,000 or so, all-in expense. And if we don't need an inspector in TPZ, that's a completely different issue. So it's totally erroneous to say it costs $13,000. It doesn't. What it costs is 70-odd thousand less what it was costing us to put the .4 of a person into that department. So maybe it's, I don't know what the number is, maybe it really costs us $50,000, whatever the number is. But I think
The number's 13,000, Ken.
it's only 13 if you mix apples and oranges, Bob.
No, the number's 13 in total payroll.
No, I understand that, but that's
I
like
had
saying that we
12.6
lost somebody at the golf
No,
course.
no, I had
and therefore-
12.6 people. Let's pretend it's my department for a second. I had 12.6 people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pretend it was one department, 2 units. I got the 2 units together. At the end of the day, instead of having 12.6, I have 13.0. I have increased my labor hours by .4 FTE,
Can-
and I've not added anybody new.
Tom, can I respond?
Yes, you can.
This is math as much as anything else. It's not really ideology. If we don't need an inspector in TPZ and that reduces their head count, that's one thing. If the buildings department needs a secretary, that's another thing. The two have literally nothing to do with each other. So yes, you're right, but that's like saying that's like saying that, you know, they don't need a secretary over at the golf course, so we should add a secretary to his department, and therefore we haven't increased expenses. I mean, that's mathematically true, but it's totally irrelevant. All I'm saying is I'm not necessarily saying we don't need a secretary. I'm not saying that. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that we should accept the fact that by choosing to have a full-time new person in that department, we are adding a $70,000 or $75,000 expense to our budget, notwithstanding what's going on in another department. That's all I'm saying. Actually, that's not totally true, because you are losing.
No, it's not totally
You're losing
true
the
be-
.4. I understand that.
Yeah, I'm losing
But-
the .4. Well, I lost the secretary. The secretary was funded in my department and got split up between two departments.
I understand all that, and we heard it last year, and I understand that, and it may not have been the way we wanted it to work out, like Mr. Walsh said, due to the contingency issue. But the reality is that we're bringing on a new person with full benefits. That's the reality. And that's a very expensive proposition for our town. It may be necessary, but I just think it's critical that we know, you know, what we're voting on.
I'm not
so
sure I
to
agree with
speak.
you. If you look at it from your perspective, if you ignore what's going on in TPZ, then the cost is 33,000, okay? Because we're not bringing on a new person. The person is already exists.
Aren't you taking?
No, you're adding a new person.
Adding a new person. You're taking
adding a
the
new
existing
person.
person, throwing them back to TBZ,
And
and then
giving
you're
them-
hiring a
We're adding a .6 person over in TPZ, or over in building.
No, you're not.
We're going from 6.4 in building to 7.0 in building.
No, you're adding a full head count. You're adding one body.
We're going from 6.4 to 7.0.
No, you're not, because what you're doing is ignore the rest of what's going on in TPZ. You've got a .6 person in TPZ and a .4 person in the building department, right? You want to add one full-time person in the building department and move the .4 back over into TPZ. That's adding one more body at a full cost, because you're not going to work for 60% of what you're making now. You're going to be working at 100%, but you're just going to be all allocated to TP&Z. What Ken is saying is absolutely right. There's a separate issue here, which goes to a reduction in force between the zoning enforcement officer and the inspector. And there's also, to throw that in, there's also another part-time clerk in here that wasn't in here last year. So you'd have to throw it all together if you want to do.
I was going to wait till the TPD night.
Right. We don't have to go through it, but the point is, it's absolutely, I mean, you phrased it quite well.
Yeah, thank you for articulating it better than I did.
Not better, just different.
So, I'm going to go, Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey's been very patient here, so if that's okay, Mr. DeWitt, I'm going to go over to her.
Thank you. And I just recognize the sensitivity of this conversation, given that there are people in the room who we're talking about, so I appreciate some of the discomfort possibly in that. I just wanted to also, back to what Mr. Walsh had said earlier, I did ask about the secretary last year as well, and I recognize that as a revenue-generating department, it's important that we support the work that you do. That said, I think I also asked this last year, and I'll ask again this year, are there any plans that you have for any automating, or is there anything that you can do that can be done through technology? I see the file cabinet requests. In other words, the state requires the paper. So I'm just wondering, are there ways that we can help ease the burden in the department that are other than adding people and FTEs? Are there things that can be done there in that way?
No, not unless you can get the state legislator to, the state librarian to change her records retention laws. I've already tried for the last 5 years.
So there, other than the records retention, are there any other ways that we can, in terms of our application
No,
process?
it's just
or-
so much work is generated through that office. We're talking about 5,000 permits a year. And we're talking about 5 people taking care of 5,000 jobs that get an average of 5 or 6 inspections apiece. Some of them more, some of them 20 or 30. You're talking about scheduling appointments. You're talking about scheduling inspections, filing. There's just so much work to be done in the office. One person can't do it.
Right, and I recognize that you do need people to do that work, and some of the scheduling, that's a great example. Is there a way, right now you have to call and get scheduled by talking to someone in the department.
Right, you talk to a person.
Is there any way that people would be able in the future to do that online? And obviously, you're
Other
going to have to have
towns,
follow-up
other
by
towns
people.
have it that way, but if you'd like to go to Greenwich and take out a permit and wait for 3 or 4 weeks for an inspection, that's, I don't think the people, the builders or homeowners would like that.
Right, so,
Stanford's the same way.
And-
You call up, put your name on a voicemail, they'll call you back, and then they'll see when they can fit you in.
and I guess I thank you for bringing up that point in terms of waiting, and it goes to the issue that we were talking about during the Public Works conversation, that, and again, this is a revenue-producing department. I recognize that we tend to discuss that in a different way, and it is a different issue. But that when we look at making cuts to the budget, again, it's the issue of the prioritizations, which is what you've had to deal with this past year, given the staffing that you've had. So it's a reality that we face, just naming that again.
Yeah, well, for the last, actually, it's been going on 3 years, I've been asking for a secretary. And it was funded 3 years ago, too. And that funding went elsewhere. It went to the tax collector and the tax assessor to split a person. It's exactly, it came out of my budget. I didn't know it until the day I opened the book. And the office cannot operate the way it's operating now. There's no way around it. I can't. It's backed up. It's going to be backed up worse because the one secretary that I have took a 2-week vacation for the first time in 3 years. And when she comes back, she has, three weeks worth of work to do. And try catching up after a storm where you've already added probably 400 or 500 permits just from the storm that we don't normally get. And you have one person doing it. Can't be done. And if you so decide, you'll find out that you'll be looking for another person. not just that one.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey? I'm going to go to Mrs. Leclerc, then I'll go back to Mr. DeWitt.
Okay. I'm not quite sure who this question's for, but the new secretary that may be hired, it belongs to Thea. And so will that person be under a new 401K plan, or will they be in the defined contribution?
Should be under the new 401K plan.
Okay. And then the only other question I had is, when you were talking about records retention, are you required to maintain the original documents, or can you scan them in and maintain them like as a PDF file on the computer? And
Anything over 10 years, you can file. We have to keep the application. So 1 and 2 family houses, you can get rid of the drawings. Okay, blueprints and stuff like that for 1 and 2 family homes can be destroyed after a period of 2 years after the certificate of occupancy is issued. Okay, but the actual application for the permits, for electrical permits, plumbing permits, heating permits, building permits, all have to be kept for the life of the building.
okay. It's a long time.
Okay, and in the case of commercial buildings, all the drawings have to be kept for the life of the building also. So I have 2 libraries in the basement
Okay.
that are full.
Right, that's, I thought
So,
maybe
I
if
know-
we
yeah.
could scan it, it would
And that's
say-
why you'll see one capital item in there for $5,000 for some file cabinets. I ran out.
All right, thank
He's
you.
good. Mr. DeWitt? Then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Just to follow up on Selectman McCarthy-Vahey's comments, you know, this is a 2-year discussion, right? Last year, I was personally agreed, having been a customer of the building department and of the TP&Z, frankly. I think you guys do a pretty good job with the staff you have, but understand the need there. So just on a personal and for you, I am personally not questioning the new TPZ secretary. I'm not questioning the new building secretary. I'm really questioning the rearranging of I don't even know what it's called anymore, the inspector, thank you, and how it appears as if a need for a role completely went away, but then was reclassified. I think the individual secretary roles are very much needed, just like I thought they were needed last year.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I really think before drawing any conclusions, you need to listen to Mr. Devanchik. There are certain legal requirements within zoning concerning the zoning enforcement officer. And I understand how it might appear that way on the surface to you here. I just would hold judgment until you've talked to Mr. Devanchik.
I'm good with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Gillen, you speak to fellow building inspectors in other towns?
Yes. Yes, I do.
In looking at other departments in other towns that you've actually had a chance to look at, is there another department that processes 5,000 building inspections a year that only has 1 secretary?
No.
None?
None that I know of.
None that you know of?
No.
Are we considered to have a lot of permits
Yes.
as a town?
Yeah, we have a woman that comes in once a month from the state of Connecticut, and from the Dodge report and stuff. We file with them and the federal government, everything that's going on. And every month she comes in and tells us that we issue more permits than anybody.
All right. It just, I think that just goes to this, to show the need for another secretary, regardless of whether you're in the department or not. I would also suggest that we've looked at this issue before, as early as last year, and thought there was a need, and that need has not changed, or has it gone up since last year? We doing more permits now than last year, you said earlier, correct?
Oh, yeah, right, as of right now, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey?
Thank you. I just want to clarify and be clear that last year and this year, I support this position because it is clear that there's a need. I think that as we have these conversations across every department, I think what you're hearing, Mr. Gillerin, and what other department heads have heard, is that we need to take a look at every available option, which is why I asked the questions about automation. I think that some of those things, whether there's a person there or not, are issues that a lot of people go online now to do things. I'm not suggesting that I want people or businesses to wait extra time than they do already. I just think that in today's day and age, now is the time that we do a lot of things online, and that's the nature of my questions. But it's clear that you have the need in the department.
Yes, I've also, there is another increase in the budget, and it's under communications. And basically what that is for laptops to replace Palm Pilots that our software requires that you use. I was asked by Donald Leslie to add that $2,500 into the communications for laptops. The laptops will actually have docking stations in the office and replace the desktops. So they can go into the car, come out of the car, go into, and everything will sync into our
System.
our system. Basically, the company that we deal with now, Mitchell Humphrey, that sells the software, has a web-based software that is available, but it's been put on hold. In other words, that web-based software would be able to be used by people coming and answering. They could go to the library and look up, whether their inspections were done, or they could apply for permits, or it's web-based, and yes, you could have kiosks, which we thought of 15 years ago when we built the 2 kiosks that are sitting up in the hallway upstairs with no computers in them. They're wired, but there's no computers there. But we had to get the software. We waited 5 years for that. After we bought Phoenix, that was so good. We had to buy another financial software. So we couldn't buy the building department software, the land use software. And now we're kind of at a standstill. Actually, I was trying to get licenses for the other departments. It was actually approved by this board 4 years ago when Nancy Nash was running IT, and I don't know where the money went. I never got the licenses for the other departments, even though they were approved.
What were the, refresh our memory, Mr. Gillen?
Yeah, the license, I think it was a total of like $3,000 or $4,000, $3,500 for $200 for each department, or $250 for a license, so that planning and zoning, conservation engineering, the fire marshal's office, the health department, the tax assessor could all look into our software. It was basically read-only. Although the software is built up for electronic sign-offs from those other departments for plan review.
Workflow, a workflow approval.
Yes, excuse me. The software is all set up for that already. That's why I wanted those licenses, because instead of sending reports to the assessor's office, they can look online and see what we did. I don't have to print out copies of everything and send them over there.
And you have no idea what happened?
I don't know what happened to the licenses. They were approved. I don't know what happened to the money to get them. They were, for each department.
Mr. Mayor, can we look into that, please?
What was the question?
That was Nancy Nash. That was, what, 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, but if we approved $4,000
Yeah.
and you don't know where it went, I'm a little concerned.
I never got my license.
I think that's a question for IT and Mr. Leslie,
Yeah.
and we can follow up and get that.
Thanks. Ms. McCarthy V.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gillerin, for that information. I think I do recall the conversation about the licenses and that idea, which is something that does save on the workload for the folks in the office, and it opens up their
Yeah,
time to be
all-
able to address some of the other needs.
Yeah, all the other departments could, get into the software instead of somebody picking up a phone and calling over, the fire marshal calling us about a project here or there, or or after he does a plan review, he can electronically sign off from his office. And once all the sign-offs are done from each department that's doing a plan review on a project, that program actually spits out the permit, here it is, and it goes by email. And no one even has to come in and get it.
Thank you.
I mean, we have the technology, it's there.
Anybody else have anything else on this budget? All right, we'll go to 5070, which is engineering, and then we'll go to the public. Well, hang on, before you go, Mr. Gillerin, does anybody have any questions, comments from the public? Please. Actually, comments. I want to stay away from questions.
Peter Ambrose, RTM District 2. I can attest to the need for increased secretarial help for Mr. Gillerin. I can tell you from my standpoint, I know that their department is very much involved in the whole blight process. And I know that Caroline spends an appreciable amount of time every week on blight complaints and following up on blight complaints, which is something that Jim did not even mention. Furthermore, more and more lawyers now are confronted with the fact that we now are doing municipal searches and have to prove to banks that in cases where certificates of occupancy were not previously issued, they must be issued now for many projects. And we're constantly in Jim's office trying to close out building permits that were never issued with COs. And I know their time is limited, and we're told often that we've got to come back in a few days and they'll look into that issue. But again, we've got closings that are held up sometimes and other issues confronted by the lack of secretarial help that Jim has.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. Mr. Gillerin, being literally surrounded by lawyers, I feel your pain.
I was going to say, I mean, some of my best customers are sitting on either side of you.
Yeah.
They
Do we have other
they know how
comments
long
from the public?
They know how long the
Please.
wait is and how
Mr.
they feel
Connolly.
if they can't get it today. What do you mean I have to wait till Friday? I have a closing on Thursday. Yeah,
I'm nice.
Oh.
Tom Conley. I wear many hats, and one of them is Jim's assistant. I just wanted to speak to Mr. Walsh's question. Just a little comment in the ability when we do not have a secretary. The effect of it is inspectors are doing secretarial work, which means we can't truly assess the value of a permit. Statutorily, we're allowed to question the permit value. That is no longer being done. We just take the value given to us, assess a fee, and say thank you very much, because we're doing as many as 40 permits in a 2.5-hour time, answering the phone, scheduling ourselves. So it's very problematic. I believe that, in fact, we lose money for the town simply by doing that. The next is I'm doing all the commercial code review. Once the fire marshal has that code review, it comes to us. We're sitting on probably $8,000 to $10,000 on my desk right now because I'm doing secretarial work during the day. So it's just a problem. So I just want to let everybody know it is a dollar and cents thing that really comes to play here. For those two reasons. We cannot assess those. A simple assessment today was one of the inspectors did find something. We can't follow up on it. So there's the permit. We got our dollars. It should have been double. It's out of our hands now. So
Thank you, Mr.
It really is a
Connolly.
dollar and cents thing to us. So.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Gillerin, I'm sorry. If you could hold on just a second. Any other questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll go back to the board real quick. I want to remind everyone, Mr. Connolly brought it up, there are revenue items associated with this. So would everyone just take a quick look? Does anybody have any comments or questions on the revenue lines? We have Mr. Gillerin here. I had it just a few minutes ago and I lost it. So the answer to your question is no, I don't have it. I think,
Page 22.
yeah, I think it is 22.
But if you,
Lines 42112 through 42118.
Not
Carthy Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and not necessarily about revenue specifically, though in general, to Mr. Connolly's comments, that 2.5-hour time period, I just want to highlight that's a really compressed period of time in which to do the work. So I appreciate his bringing attention to that.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy. Anyone else have any questions on revenue? Mrs. Leclerc?
I was just wondering, is the building permit revenue line built on specific projects that are expected to be coming through, or is it just an estimate?
Yes, but at the time when I did this, I didn't plan on a hurricane.
Okay.
So that's why it's less than it was.
Right.
The train station project has come to a halt. There are projects that were supposed to happen 2-3 years ago that just haven't materialized. Like I said, I'd have to guess. Normally, I get a good idea of what's coming out of zoning, talking to contractors, talking to developers, and knowing what they plan on doing. But in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, they've lost financing, they've lost partners in projects, and they haven't followed through them. So, that's why, okay, there was a shortage in revenue last year, but it was minor. I think I had and also there was a mistake over a long time that in my budget message, when I put a price on how much revenue we would make every year, that was all of these items, not just one. So in other words, when Mr. Flato saw my $1.3 million that we were going to make that year, he put it under building, and then put all the rest of the permits on there. So basically, I was supposed to make $1.6 million, and then we're short, $300,000, which we weren't. That was one total number for the whole year.
Are you comfortable with the numbers that are in here this year?
Yeah, actually, I'm over them right now.
For next year, I mean.
For next year? Oh, yeah. Just after the meeting we had with the people at the beach and seeing the show of hands at the end of the last question we asked at that meeting was how many people plan on raising their house, and all 200 people that were still left in the auditorium raised their hand. We've got a lot of work.
Do we have an opportunity here to raise revenue for 2013-14?
It is possible.
Can we ask you to take a look at that with Mr. Merritt before we vote?
Sure.
Thank you for that. Do we have other questions? Mr. Walsh, and then, okay. Mrs. Albin, you're all set? Just have to see by Mr. Walsh.
Sure.
Anybody? Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Gillen, are the revenue numbers there, were those the numbers that you gave the administration, or were those different numbers?
No, these are the ones I gave them.
Okay.
For this year.
Sure. What's the reason why you were predicting that building permit revenue would go down by 20%, but yet electrical permits, plumbing, and heating would go up in the 30s?
This was changed a couple of times. I raised the plumbing and because of the storm.
Okay.
At the time, no one had gotten any insurance money.
Okay.
So they weren't raising their houses, they weren't tearing them down, they weren't building new ones. The demolition, nothing had happened when I put this. But the electrical and the plumbing I knew about. Any house that had water in it, there's a new hot water heater, new electrical service, new boiler, new condenser for an air conditioner. The mechanical permits were already on their way up. That's why I added those numbers in there. The houses are just starting. People are still trying to find the insurance money, and those were the questions we answered at the beach meeting. These people didn't know where to start. How come I haven't gotten my money yet? When am I going to get it? So I can raise my house, so I can demolish my house, so I can build a new house. And they're still looking at ways of doing this. So those permits are coming. That's why I said we could probably adjust that revenue, this way. At least on the building end of it, because those permits are just starting to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Giller. Any other questions, comments on this? I think we've sat you here long enough. I appreciate your time and your attention.
You're welcome.
And we wish you luck, and thanks for all the hard work, particularly with the storms. We know you and your team work very hard on that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Josephine, thank you as well. All right. With that, we'll go to the engineering department, Department 5070. Mr. Mayor, if we could follow up on that revenue, those revenue line items, get back to us before we vote, please.
Most definitely.
Thank you. All right, we're on page 219. Hello. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Long time no see. All right, so the approved budget for this year was $761,109. And the budget for next year is $761,428. So what are you going to do with the $320? $319?
Yeah, this is just the engineering department consists of 7 full-time employees, 1 part-time employee. As you see, the bulk of the items are salary-driven. There's
The vast majority of everything is personnel-driven.
correct personnel and salary-driven.
And again,
correct?
this is one of those where we do not have the year-over-year increase in here because the contract has not been finalized, correct?
When you look at some of the departments in town, there may be a mix. If it's a,
Right. I think it's on the
oh,
next
actually, in
page.
this case, no, it won't. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the current year, where we had some contracts settled. Going into next year, we don't.
So this is
So they would
the,
be, you're right, you're correct, they would be reserved, with the exception of ECC and nurses, which are the 2 contracts that extend into next year.
So there are no, I'm asking, are there salary increases in here or not? There's not.
There should not be.
Right.
There will be no salary increases in any of the DPW.
Yep.
And
No,
it-
we said it earlier, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, any questions, comments on this budget? Mr. Brockfeld?
Sure, I'm missing something, but I'll ask the question at the risk of embarrassment. Health self-insurance. We have no changes in personnel, is that right?
Correct.
So why is that only going up 1%?
Okay.
Because our insurance isn't going up.
Now, there's a way to embarrass me. Let's see. Our health insurance costs for next year will be flat?
I really have no idea. I'll take that statement back. Our experience has been very good this year. We have savings there this year so far. I will be working with Aon to prepare the final recommendation from my office using the experience utilization through February 28th, which I hope to complete sometime by early next week. But as of right now, it looks promising.
Okay.
Mr. Tetra?
I think the estimates that were used or were known when this book was put together are also reflected in the driver's page, and if you look at that, it shows it up as 1.25% overall.
On the town side.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments on this budget? Mr. Walsh?
Getting back to the question I asked you earlier, if this budget was to be cut, what priorities or what services would you not be able to supply? And do you know off the top of your head what would be impacted immediately?
Yeah, other than personnel, there's really not that much. The next 2 biggest are in the the $3,000 range for fuel, another $3,000 for material. So the $3,000 in fuel basically gets you 20,000 miles plus on our vehicles, and the gear that they buy is basically survey equipment. There's some copier costs in there. There's a reprographic machine which generates some income, but there's really nothing. It's not that that large a budget where there could be any significant savings.
But once again, if we're to tell you a number and you're forced to manage to that budget, you'll have to make do, correct?
Correct, and just looking at the line items, even though the fuel account is $3,500. That's, somewhat higher than it was in previous years, so that's an area where there may be some opportunities for cutting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments on this? All right. Seeing none, I think we're done with this. Any questions, comments from the public? All right. Thank you, Mr. Michelangelo. Appreciate it. We will go to budget number 4070, streetlights. And this is page 187 and 188. Right. Mr. Walsh, any cuts to this budget will make the lights go dark. That's the answer to this. Yeah. I couldn't resist. Any questions?
Still cut it.
Exactly. Exactly. Any questions, comments on this line?
In preparing this, in preparing for tonight's meeting with Ed Bowman, the assistant who prepares a lot of these things, there's been some changes to this, which was, if you read from page 187,
Yeah.
and you go through the totals, the 140 and the 480 plus the 45, in the total, we neglected to carry over the total amount. So that's the bad news, that the 45,000 was not added to the total and carried it over. But in working through these numbers, there's some reduction in the transmission figure, and also in the generation, and also in the delivery charges. And a couple I could explain further. The rates that we're paying, we pay 7.5 cents per kilowatt hours for the streetlights. At the second half of the year, it'll go down to 6.22 cents. So that'll represent some saving over that figure. And in the delivery charge, there was an assumption that there'd be a rate hike for the streetlights, which has not come about yet, and it's not scheduled to be considered yet. So the net of those, we feel a better dollar amount for this account will be $640,000. And once again, there's basically 3 components, so it's not, terribly complicated and not too many variables involved. So that would be a more appropriate figure.
Okay, so this year you have 615. What does that mean about the 615? Are you going to come in higher than that number?
Possibly, but we'll probably be pretty close to that.
What is the play we have in streetlights, in all seriousness? I mean, we did, I did tease about what can we cut here.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, what type of obligation do we have? What can we do with this account?
Well, the amount of streetlights we add that builds up the total is very small, so the net number doesn't increase. Some towns have considered turning off their lights for a certain period during the evening. There is some towns, and there's in the CLMP area, which have gotten into the streetlight business, where you purchase the streetlights from CLMP or from the power company. I don't believe any UI town has been able to do that, but that's some options that other towns have considered to reduce the grand total.
So we don't add a significant number of streetlights every year or anything like that?
Correct. The number doesn't go up tremendously. If there's a dozen added every year to our several thousand, doesn't add to the cost significantly.
Are there any other questions on this item? Mr. Walsh?
What time are the lights on from? Do they go on automatically based on lighting conditions?
Correct, yeah, they're set on timers. I think they go on automatically. And the only ones that are different are there's a separate component of lights along the post road, which are the new LED ones that we put in, which is the 45,000. Those go off approximately midnight, but those are timed to go off at midnight. So.
And the savings from those LED lights is even, is in those, in this number. So it goes up despite the fact that we saved on the LED lights versus when they were incandescent.
Correct, because we have a 3, so for the first 3 years, we won't see any significant savings till after the payback is, and the capital charge is paid back for these lights.
Any other question on this item? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. Now we're at Department number 6070, which is Solid Waste and Recycling. Good evening.
Good evening. Michael Zambruski.
Hello, Mr. Zabruski, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Just make him feel a little bit old. He told me before the meeting tonight that he just became a grandfather.
Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
Thanks.
Boy or girl?
Girl.
Way to go, Mike.
Thanks.
We can only hope she looks like your wife and your daughter.
Not a problem.
Tom, this guy's in charge of solid waste. You might want to be careful.
All right, the original budget I had
What
projected...
page are you?
It's page 233 in the budget list.
I originally was going to have the transfer station open 6 full days in the recycling center, but due to the restrictions, I see we're going to have to cut that down to 5.5 days, which it's currently open. Based on the First Selectman's budget number, I can reduce the budget more by a total of $134,409. I can take a couple, take some numbers out of the line items. 53,200 can be reduced by $49,986. Line item 5400 can be reduced $28,860.
Well, Mike, could you go a little slower with those?
Yes, it's
Could you
going to
take
be the
that,
first one.
if you
Read
could go
the
back
first
to the
one
first
again.
one again for us?
49.
We're trying to...
$49,986. Line item 53200 can be reduced.
And then 54010
Correct.
can be reduced 28,860, correct?
Correct. This would give our expense basically a 3.2% increase from last year.
This is by keeping it only 5.5 days? Is that
Correct.
Mike, that doesn't, you had mentioned, I think, when you first started, $130,000 worth of savings, is that what you said?
Yeah, based on the position that was cut.
Ah, so it's already baked in.
It's
Got it.
reflected, yes.
Okay.
Additional
So this is
total-
what's- This
total
is
cut.
what's not reflected then.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
And with that also, the revenue will drop $57,500. But we still have a 5.25% increase in revenue from last year.
So we need to make an adjustment to revenue downwards, which isn't quite as much as a reduction in expense, but it's pretty
Correct.
darn close to what we're looking at
Correct.
right now. Okay. And curious, you gentlemen had a conversation and decided to keep the number of hours the same. Is that the, what happened between you and the first selectman? Just tell us what happened in the hours of operation.
Simply, it would have taken an extra headcount to keep them open longer.
Okay, so there was an economic analysis done that said we didn't gain as much as revenue as it would to cost us to keep the place open, for, which would have been an extra head count. That's as simple as what it was. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Brockfeld, then I'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
I'm just trying to understand the numbers. This is a pure number question. So you want us, you're saying that the lines that we have in front of us, fiscal 14 First Selectmen's recommended budget, right?
Yes.
You're saying we could take down two lines, one by 49,986 and one by 28,860?
Correct.
If we keep it open 5.5 days rather than 6. Is that what I'm
Correct.
hearing? Okay. And then you already have a reduced line item in the payroll, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is that related to the 5.5 versus 6 days?
Yes, that's keeping the current staff as is right now.
Right. So why, I'm just curious, if we took that out of the payroll, why didn't we already take out these numbers out of the, in other words, why are we taking these numbers out now? Why weren't they just taken out when you took out the body? It's just a clerical question, I guess.
When I found out that the staff position was cut,
Right.
we have contracts with Enviro, we have recycling and trash. I had to go back and see how much we would pay, how much less we would pay them per contract.
So at the time this was printed, you didn't know that yet?
No.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. Second question is, why would there be a reduction in revenue by going to 5.5 versus 6 days?
The extra traffic every day, the extra traffic coming in for the half-day
And the traffic comes in and does what?
dumps the trash.
So
So
what
we're
do
that
they
much
do? What do they
less-
do with the trash if they don't? I mean, if you don't squeeze it into 5.5 days, where does it go?
We're not sure. We were getting complaints from the police, illegal dumping, and other people were dumping in, dumpsters, so.
So what you're saying
People were
is-
complaining that they didn't have enough time to get to the dump, so.
So, and this, I'm really asking these questions, I don't understand what you do
Right.
as well as I should. So, you're saying that you have an actual capacity issue, or it's every 8-hour shift, or whatever it is, I don't know how many hours you're open each day, but every day, or every hour for that matter, you have only so much garbage and so forth you can take. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we get anywhere from sometimes 100 to 200 cars an hour.
No, what I'm
I
trying
mean,
to...
in the trucks,
No, I hear you. I'm just saying that, like, there's two ways I can look at this. I can hear that you have absolutely a limit of how much you can take, right? So by cutting out half a day, you are literally reducing the amount you can take in any week, right? That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
It sounds like the right way, by the way. Or you could say to me that you're inconveniencing the customers slightly, but they still can bring it all in over those 5.5 hours.
Correct.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and
So
one of
so which is it? In other words, I mean,
Well,
could you
both.
take the 6 days' worth of stuff in 5.5 days from a physical point of view?
yeah, we've been doing it for
Right.
forever. I
Right,
mean,
so
we can-
so that's why I'm asking why there'd be a reduction in revenue.
We're not getting the extra people coming in. I don't know what, I would assume that they would be coming in, would get more people coming in more frequently, cleaning out their houses and just, instead of waiting every 2 weeks to go to the dump, they go every week.
If I may, we added more revenue with the hours, we subtracted the hours, we subtracted the revenue.
No,
I think he understands it.
I understand that totally.
but
What I don't understand is, I mean,
hasn't
garbage is not something that you just choose to keep
Well,
forever.
then we shouldn't have added it in the beginning.
May
In
I?
other words, but it needs to be deducted because it was added.
Right, but.
What you're
Mr.
saying is there not a certain, in that case, the error was in the adding, not in the deducting.
No, I don't think there's any error. I'm just asking is, maybe I'm not asking you right, if people have, I'm just making, these numbers are completely made up, obviously. If people have 100 tons of trash that needs to be discarded of every week, right? I mean, you could discard that in 1 day, in 2 days, in 5 days, in 5.5 days, or 6 days, right? I mean, obviously, if you did it all in 1 day, it would be very busy. If you did it in 2 days, it would be less busy, and 6 days would be leisurely, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I'm just asking is, where is this stuff going? I understand.
Some of the
your-
material is not coming into Fairfield, it should be coming in.
No,
And
that's-
having
that's the
us
answer, right.
out there, and that was the other, with the position, having a full-time position there at the scale house,
Right.
our coordinator would be able to come back into town hall and go out and do the inspections, because we've got 2,800 businesses that every year are supposed to be inspected. We've got 2 universities, 4 high schools, and
Inspected for what?
recycling and
Oh.
trash violations,
Right.
according to state statutes.
So, this is important, I think. So you're saying that we are quote-unquote losing business potentially because of this to where? Bridgeport, Norwalk,
Correct.
Stanford? I mean,
And potentially, now we have a new agreement with Winter Brothers with our recycling, that we are projecting now every year $100,000 for recycling revenue that we've never seen before. So we're getting revenue from the recyclables that the haulers are picking up at your houses. We're getting revenue now back into the town.
I'd like to yield this to anyone else who has a question. I still have
Well,
more.
I'd like to try and help understand. So my husband and I have been talking about this. We have a private hauler at this point, but in an effort to save money in our budget, perhaps that we would bring our garbage down, which we haven't done. So if I drive my car down with garbage from a week or 2 weeks, how will I be charged when I go down to the scale
You're
house?
charged by weight or volume. It's usually 99% of the cars are charged $5.
Okay. That's my question. So 99% of the cars are charged $5. So in other words, if the house is open, or if you're open for another half a day, it's $5 for every time the cars
Correct.
come in.
So that would
in
be
other
more
words,
traffic
if
coming
I,
in.
that's, I think, part of the calculation in the revenue change, because
But that assumes, if I may, Ms. Kristen, that if the place isn't open that half day when you wanted to go, that you would just stack your house with garbage and never throw it away. But, I mean, when they stop delivering mail on Saturdays, it doesn't mean we're not going to get our mail. It means we're just not going to
No.
get it on Saturday. We'll get it on Monday in a bigger pile, right?
Correct,
So
but
I just don't understand why there's a loss in revenue just because the place is not open for half a day.
Because I included the extra amount of cars, the 11,000
Right.
extra cars, or 10,005, whatever. But the extra cars that I anticipated we would get when we were open, the extra hours on Saturdays.
So you assume volume,
right,
not
right,
weight.
exactly.
Mr.
That
Chair, if
was
I
my
might,
question.
there were
my
two
comment.
changes here, I think, is what Mike is saying. We haven't been open 6 days forever. We've been open 5.5 days forever. So the change this year Mike was proposing is we go from 5.5 to 6 days. When we made that change, he increased the revenue. When we went back to 5.5 days, that amount of increase was then reduced. So you're not wrong in what you're saying, but because we were open 5.5 days, because we're open 6, doesn't mean folks are going to throw more stuff away. Though in some cases it may come through, but we just thought it was appropriate, or that whatever we increased it by, we decreased it by for the same hours, so that we're...
But in a way, if I may, in a way, that actually makes me more curious, because by increasing that half day, do we imagine that garbage was just going to appear that didn't exist before? No. In other words, I don't get...
May I?
Yeah.
So, for example, I think it's not that garbage wouldn't appear. I'm just going to use my day-to-day life as an example. So we have morning soccer games and we can't get there. So we're not going where we might go theoretically each week. That week I may not go, and it's not open in the afternoon. I'm not going that week. So that's the revenue. I was curious, and this is a theoretical conversation because it's not happening, but was curious about the volume calculations if you were using the half-day numbers or an average of all 6.5 days, but just to try and clarify that.
All set?
Well, yeah, I think I am. I'd like just to say what I think is the right answer. And now, Kristen, you've explained it perfectly. You don't charge by weight, you charge by visit. Is that right?
We
So if
charge
she
by
stuffs
weight
2 weeks
or
of-
volume with
Right, so if she
cars.
stuffs 2 weeks' worth of garbage in her car, she gets charged the same as if she came for 1 week. Is that right? Right.
Usually,
That's the
yeah.
answer. I thought you were charging by weight.
Well, you are technically, but if it's under the 125 pounds,
Right.
you're going to pay the
Okay.
$5.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. DeWitt?
And additionally, you're losing the 4 hours of the big haulers, which you do charge by.
Correct.
So there's two components, right, Ken? Ken, there's two components, because I do the same. I do, every 2 weeks, I go there, whether it's my car's got one bag or it's filled. So on the days that there's one bag, you're making $4.95 off me. The day it's full, you'd probably be only making $3 off me, whatever. So I wanted to understand the, I wanted to
Remind me to come over on the first day, not the 13th.
Yeah, no. I have a very regimented system, I'll tell you. You'd really be impressed, I'm sure. So, page 236, is there an error in the budget book on the part-time scale operator? To the second line, part-time scale operator, the budget was 2 people at 27,480, now it's 2 people at 43,166? Because that's a big difference, and it rolls into the next question I'm going to have. So should that number not be 27,480? See what I'm saying?
I didn't even realize it was there. We
That's,
did the budget.
that's adding almost 20 grand to
We'll
your,
look at
that's
that.
adding 20 grand to your budget. So you said before, so in your budget submission this year, you said, I need one new scale operator at $45,860 to augment the gentleman you said should be out doing inspections.
Correct. And we would then eliminate a $15,000 position for a scale operator, part-time position.
Right. You'd eliminate, right, that's why the part-time scale operator went from 3 to 2. So you're saying in the first selectman's budget, it should be back to 3.
There's a typo, that should be back to 3.
So that should be back to 3. But I got to tell you, I'm beginning to think that's short-sighted. So we've got 6 guys there today. Yeah, we have 6 guys there today for 5.5 days, and we could have 6 guys there for 6 days. And you can debate how much revenue that brings in, but it doesn't seem like it's that much of a difference. I'm wondering if that wasn't, I'm kind of with you, that I'm there every Saturday, so if they were open till 4, it would be great. But I mean, it does, your explanation
Every
seems to
Saturday
make
or
sense.
2 Saturdays?
You know, we're getting rid of a part-time guy sitting at the scale, telling you owe $50 because you're 210 pounds, but we're losing the opportunity for that another person to go out, probably a more skilled person, I'd be willing to bet, go out and make sure that we're not losing significant revenue from haulers.
Correct.
And any idea how much we're losing? I mean, I know this has been a topic in previous years where you've said these haulers diverting to Bridgeport or somewhere else is a big deal. I mean, any idea how much we're losing today?
No, I really don't know. I don't have the time or the manpower to get out and follow trucks,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay. No, I understand. It's just, this among all the other ones seems like it warrants a little more analysis, right? That we could be short-sighted with this head, so, thanks.
Is it directly related to this?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Remember that the decrease in hours doesn't just save the expense of the one half-time or half-day salary. It also impacts, as was mentioned earlier, fees and services and contracted activity.
I get it. So
a
right
total
now,
of-
it's for
So it's like
for a loss of
$78,000.
$57,000, we're gaining 79.
79 plus the salary.
And plus the benefits.
No.
Plus the
Salaries are all taken out. Salaries are all reconciled here.
Yeah, the benefits aren't.
It was already taken out. It was already taken out.
He took the salaries. No, that's what I'm saying. Forget the salaries. Just between the money we'll get back from fees and contracted services is $79,000.
Chris, what he's saying is the total cost of that extra half-day was the salary they took out plus the $70,000 worth of cost.
No, I get it, but that number's right here.
No, but the total's 130 versus revenue of 57.
Oh, I see, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. The confusion was only part of the expense was taken out.
Yeah, no,
All the
I'm
expenses
with
went
you.
to the revenue.
I'm with you. And I guess there actually is one other expense, because there's always a security person there, right? So I'm sure has the police department taken an extra allowance for a security, there's a
That's in the budget.
Fairfield,
That's in our budget.
That's your budget,
That's
so
my
you pay
budget.
for that police
Correct.
officer to be.
Correct, yes.
So that's,
Yes, and if we were open later, we would just change the hours
Right. So there's another expense there would be.
Well, no, we would just shift the hours. Instead of having them from 9 to 1, we would have them, say, from 1 to 4, or, 12 to 4, something like that.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
extra
okay.
hour.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Thank you. Mrs. Leclerc?
Could you explain a little bit more about the revenue from recycling? Is it a set amount that we get based on a contract, or is it based on value?
Based on an agreement, we just got into we're probably going to sign the contract, the municipalities that are involved. We're getting a $20 per ton revenue for recyclables delivered to the Intermediate Processing Center, which will be in Shelton. So all of the towns that were involved, we voted on, basically, it's $1 million a year for all of the towns involved, and we're getting, based on our participation, we're getting $100,000 a year now of revenue we've never seen.
Okay, that's great. And are we making any efforts to promote it to increase recycling, or so we can make even more?
We're trying,
Okay.
all one of me.
Well, I was thinking maybe we could contact green organizations or volunteer groups that could help us promote it.
Yeah, there has been a big push on promoting recycling. You remember about a year ago, there's a big move to single-stream recycling. So there's been an ongoing effort to promote that, raise awareness, keep that going. The one difference or the one change is that with Mike's help and working with other towns around here, we've been able to find somebody who will buy our recycling. So that's why it's a new revenue stream over and above what we did. So we were doing all that promotion in the past for free. Now we're getting some reimbursement for it.
Yeah, also in the future, we hope to reconfigure our transfer station so we can go single stream up there. So we'll be able to haul more out, a greater volume, which will generate more money.
Okay, great.
All set, Mrs. Leclerc? Any other questions? Mr. Walsh?
Mike, is there a reason we don't stay open on Saturday but close one of the other days of the week so that the residents would have a greater ability to bring their own stuff down?
I'm not sure, well, we're under contract to stay open certain days.
Contract with who?
With with the CRA group, but now we're with Enviro and with recycling and trash. I don't know, you're never going to please everybody. You're going to want to, if you stay open, you got to stay open for everyone, I'm not sure.
Do you think we'd have more people and more trash coming in there if we were open on Saturday, because members of the public would have greater periods of time to bring their stuff down? I really don't know. Or to take that half day and put it on, say, Monday, so the private haulers would have Monday to still bring their stuff in between 8 and 12 or something like that.
Monday's the second busiest day of the week.
Okay.
With the haulers, the haulers, Wednesday, for the haulers, Saturday's the least busiest for the trash haulers.
Because they don't want to haul on Saturdays.
And they don't want to come down to the dump at all the residents.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, the lines are long. Mike, do you have a breakout, I think, to help answer the question? Do you have a breakout between how much of our business is commercial haulers versus residential? Any way of telling that?
I don't have it with me. I do have it, though.
Okay.
Usually it was when it was good, we had almost a 50-50, 50 commercial, 50 residential. And it's dropped down because of our prices have increased and the haulers have found other areas to dump the trash. So it's probably, I'd say, 65-35 now, 60-40 for commercial, or residential versus commercial.
So it's more residential.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up to Mrs. Leclerc's comments, the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission, with which Mr. Zimbruski works with, I know has done some promotion as well. And Mr. Zimbruski, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a Facebook page out there somewhere. So I think those folks have also been trying to support the promotion of recycling, along with Earth Day folks and others who I know you work with. It's in your budget write-up, but I know you've done a lot to help them too, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
One question from me, just based on that, brief exchange you just had on the commercial side, what kind of a price elasticity is there on what we can charge commercial haulers versus what we are? And, there's two phases to it. Obviously, the one you touched on earlier was you'd like to do more enforcement because you believe that there's items that should be coming to you that aren't, right? And then there's the incentive for people to go somewhere else because of the price.
Yep.
If we lowered the price and increased the volume, what would that do?
Our cost per ton would drop.
Okay. But how much would we have to lower the price? I mean, has that economic analysis been done so that you could see, does it make sense to lower the price to the commercial haulers so that you do get more of the volume in?
But you don't want to subsidize the commercial. It's one thing if we're subsidizing the residential sector, the haulers like we have been.
I'm not talking about subsidizing, but you made a comment that it was cheaper to go other places,
Correct.
which that means that you're outpricing the market. Your own, that's my words, but that's essentially what I'm hearing. So I'm not saying subsidize them. I'm saying if you lowered the price to be within reason of the other areas where these people can go to drop their garbage, you would just be sensitive to what the market realities are.
Correct.
You wouldn't be subsidizing, you'd be sensitive, and would you increase your haul at that point, and thereby overall be better off?
Our tonnage would increase, but so would our expense hauling out.
Understand, but what's the split there, and is
I'd
that
have
being
to,
looked?
I'd have to find out, we take into consideration the amount that we pay to operate the transfer station, that's per tonnage.
Right.
Per ton.
Understand.
And I would have to break that all down to see what the numbers would be. And our actual cost to be incinerated, the trash, that's the driver there.
Sure.
So we have to find a place. Right now, we're locked in with CRA
Right.
to take our trash, so we're,
Right, I'm just reacting to what you said, and what you said made it sound like we were more expensive than all the other people, maybe not all, but most of the other people around. So it's cheaper for these people to go somewhere else. And you referred to it as the good old days when we were 50-50. So my reaction to that is, okay, if those were the good old days, how do we get back to the point where it was 50-50? And is that just the good old days because it was a more steady income stream? Or was it the good old days because it's better for us economically? You know what I
well,
mean?
it's a combination. Times have changed. We've got transfer stations, more transfer stations around commercial. Like in Stratford, there's about 3 of them within a couple miles.
So increased competition.
Correct. Plus, July 2014, we will be entering into a new contract for trash disposal. So I can see, hopefully we can see a significant decrease in our disposal. So I can,
Costs.
our costs.
Right. Right, which would give you more play with the actual amount you're charging.
Correct.
Yeah. And just, if I can, I think following this, based on our talks, Mike, there are 3 components of folks that drop off. One is commercial. The second are the dump trucks that pick up residential. And the third are individual residents dropping things off.
Sure.
So when Mike's talking about 50-50 commercial and residential, he's not talking about Kristen's station wagon. He's talking about the dump trucks that pick up in front of your house and deliver residential trash to the transfer station. So that's one component, just to see the 3 components of that. Second,
Well,
right now on $3 million worth of cost, as the numbers are currently in the budget book, without adjustments, so I'm not,
yeah,
we bring in $2.8 million of revenue. So we're losing 7% on the business. So we may want to make sure that if we're talking about increasing trash pickup and delivery to our station, that it's something we actually make money on.
and that's my point.
Right now, we haven't solved that revenue
Right,
problem.
and the problem with what you just said is, me sitting here,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that is because of fixed costs or variable costs. If it's because of fixed costs, then you have a price elasticity that you can change that, get your volume up, and perhaps make more money. If it's because of variable costs, you're absolutely correct. I don't have that information. I can't make that projection.
Actually, in this case, it's just off the revenue line and the expense line, so I think those are both contracted numbers. There's no fixed cost component in those, is there, Mike?
Well, the fixed cost is the transfer station operation and the
Right.
recycling center. So the operation right there the more trash we bring in, the less per ton the operation would be.
Right, but that's a
That's the-
higher
that's a
number,
fixed-
that's a higher number than the 3 million that's in the line item.
I don't know. I'm saying, and no one's told me that the
And
analysis has been done.
our per ton disposal fee is fixed.
Okay,
So that would, the increase in tonnage would just lower the fixed cost on the building,
okay,
which would decrease our tonnage, our price per ton
right,
overall, or cost.
right, but I'm not, without the numbers, I don't know what that means. I just would hope we do that analysis, because I'm reacting to what you said earlier regarding the good old days in 50/50 versus 65/35. And, you know, what you're laying out, or what the first selectman's laying out, is a cost problem, right? What you're saying is of 2014, your cost should come dramatically down, right? And what I'm saying is then you have an opportunity on the volume side as well. Again, I'm talking the theoretical.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I can get the numbers out and I can
Yeah.
deliver them.
You know, just see, and you've forgotten more about this than I know. I'm just reacting to your general comment about the good old days in 65/35 versus 50/50 and losing 200,000. That's all I'm reacting to. So, and also your enforcement issue that you raised, which I know you've raised that in years past as well. So, any other questions or comments? All right, WPCA?
Okay.
Do you?
Yeah,
Are you done, Mike? Are you? No, I didn't think so. Oh, yes, please. Feel free. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Why don't you grab the one on the end there? Oh, okay, great.
Hey, how you doing?
Eric Sunman, RTM District 1 and Chairman of Public Works and Planning. But I'm going to be speaking on behalf of just being a taxpayer. You know, for the ROI on my tax dollars, I'd like to have better service. And they don't even pick up trash, you know, in our town. We have to bring it. I really think that it's been too long now that we're going without longer hours on Saturdays. I go there frequently and I see the volume of traffic midweek. You know, I can see that there could be some kind of a trade-off. I think that it would prevent people like me from, on a busy Saturday, having to store garbage 2-3 weeks. I could go every week if it was open till 3 or 4. So there are months where, you know, I'm waiting 3 weeks, and you know, it seems like we just want to have improved service. I would love to see the dump accept credit cards with a convenience fee, and do some kind of a stop and swap recycling program. Other towns are open 7 days a week, and they have these programs going on right now. And you guys do an awesome job. But being on Public Works and Planning for the last 6 years and listening to people come up to me talking about dump hours on Saturday, everyone in this room would love it to be open till 3 o'clock. And you know, it's, you know, we're cutting here or there, nickel and diming everything, but I think we have to take a look at the quality of our service and try to improve and optimize in some ways. There's people that just don't have time on Saturdays and can't afford to have a service. And I think that time is an issue. So I would support the other half of this person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board, nothing? And we'll go to WPCA. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be presenting the WPCA budget, which is page 278, I believe, or 277. So I guess-
277 through
Yep.
270, or actually 284.
Yep.
It's a long one.
Okay. In the salary items, Same number of employees are...
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
And once again, congratulations on your granddaughter. That's fantastic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did want to recognize him.
No problem. Same number of employees are budgeted, so the only variation you see is some new employees came on at lower salary. A couple other employees got promotions, but the net is just a slight decrease in the overall salaries. Once again, this department pays for all their own benefits there. So the first non-count you see is fees and professional services, which is 53200. Most of that is related to the laboratory work and testing that's required outside of the stuff that's done at the plant. About 2/3 of that. The other third is for the actual billing for our sewer user fee. Some other large ones, obviously utilities, wastewater treatment plants have a high degree of machinery in their pumps, all kinds of mechanical equipment. So any wastewater treatment plant has a large electrical component. You'll see that ours is split and our electricity usage is greatly reduced because we have some on-site electric generation done by different means there that uses natural gas, but overall that's much less than you'd expect a wastewater treatment plant of this size to use. So that's through some initiatives that's been done for the last 15 years here in town, which is very good. Some of the larger accounts, maintenance and repairs. Once again, there's a lot of mechanical equipment down there. Expensive to maintain. Highlighting another large item for I&I correction, $270,000. I&I is extraneous flow into our system, which drives our costs, creates overflows in our systems. So that's something that we've done in the past, and specifically funding a line item for that. And once again, by reducing flow, we gather some capacity and save in utility costs, chemical costs, et cetera. Once again, I'll go down to the capital outlay account, because that's one I want to make note of. There was quite a few backlog of major capital items which were there. So in the capital budget, when I was preparing this with Mike Fenoy, our superintendent, we targeted $1.455 million of capital repairs. This budget has gone before the Water Pollution Control Authority, and we presented it both at the January meeting and at the February meeting, and they were supportive of all these initiatives. But one of their recommendations that instead of being paid out of the operating budget, that line item be reduced to $135,000, and the remainder, $1.32 million, be taken out of WPCA fund balance. And one of the reasons for that is this way we don't see a one-time spike in the operating budget, which would distort previous and future years. With that, I'll defer to the authority on questions.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, this is a significant capital request when taken in the aggregate. Is there a reason why this didn't come to us through the non-recurring budget? Understanding that the individual items they vary in amounts, but taken in the aggregate, it's a substantial amount. And obviously, these are not the type of items that are really what you would call, yearly maintenance or anything like that. These are, pretty long-term type things. Mr. Tetra?
If I might, just because Joe is going through this for the first budget, the non-recurring items feed into our debt service for the town.
Understood.
These items would be paid for by the WPCA.
Oh, because
out
it's
of their
self-funded.
funds. Correct.
I got it. Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, but the question still remains, if this goes forward, there's one line item here that equals the expenses. we get a separate assessment every year for WPCA. So we're saying that everybody's WPCA bill would go up 28%? Or what are we saying here?
The WPCA currently has a fund balance. They have their own capital reserve.
Sure.
Which is in the several million range.
But you're only saying use 135,000 of that, right?
Well, no, the 135,000 would come out of the operating budget.
And go and be used by capital, right?
Well, once again, one of the reasons they spiked it up, because some of the items, there are some items here which are in the $30,000 range, $50,000 range.
No, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I get that. But when I look at the revenue line, right, which has to equal the expense line, so I go back to the revenue line.
Yeah.
And the revenue line goes up by 28%. We'll take the 130 out, okay, maybe it goes up by 26%, 25%, okay? What I'm saying is when homeowners get their WPCA bill, will that WPCA bill have gone up by 25% year over year if we were to approve this because your operating expense went up by that amount and because the revenue to that line went up by that amount?
Okay, just to expand, 1.32 million was the amount that was taken out of the operating budget.
1.32, not 130?
Well,
He's saying leave 130 in the
Correct.
WPCA budget and take out 1.3 for the fund balance, right?
correct. So specifically,
Okay. I missed those two
Okay,
numbers.
and I probably didn't say it right. And the target, the WPCA wanted to get to a 1.8% increase. That's where they
Got
wanted
it.
to keep it at. This way it wouldn't affect the ratepayers.
Okay, so you do want to use, that's good. Okay, so you're taking it down out of that, reducing the operating budget, using the fund balance to pay for it, and you want an overall increase of 1.38%.
Correct.
Okay.
The new number of capital is what?
132,000? I had it reversed. Is that right?
135.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
135,000.
That's why I was
Okay,
confused.
I misheard you and had it reversed.
Something like 135 even.
Yeah.
Okay, got it now. So the line item for capital goes from 1.4 million to 132,000, just so I'm absolutely clear on this, correct?
And
May-
therefore, the revenue, the associated revenue should be adjusted by that same amount,
Okay, got it, thank you.
correct?
Yes.
Total increase of 1.8%.
Thank you for the clarification. And thank you for cleaning up my coronary. Mr. Bolito.
Just a request, Mr. Mayor, this page and the other ones that we've done tonight that have had adjustments, if we could just follow up with corrected pages with the changes that highlighted, so we have, understood.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think I think what the plan is, at the moment anyway, we certainly keep track of all these conversations.
Right.
And we are carrying, and we have a log of each item that will be brought before the board the night you do your discussion.
Thank you.
Can we actually see that beforehand? Because remember, the Board of Selectmen votes before us. So can we actually see it before the Board of Selectmen votes to see what adjustments are out there?
Yeah, we can present that
Next week would be
next
great
week
if you had it.
with what we have to date.
That'd be perfect. Thank you. Any other questions on this budget? Anybody, considering the massive adjustment? No?
Just
Mrs.
comment.
McCarthy-Vehy.
Mr. Michelangelo, if you could just let everyone know in terms of that capital reserve fund.
What the balance is?
Yeah, the decision was made based on a healthy balance in that fund. It wasn't simply just to try and hide that increase. In other words, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, and I can't get into my email right now, but if you could help so that everyone can be assured in that way as well.
Okay. If we look up if we click some numbers to look up the fund balance right now, I think it's slightly under 4 million. But once again, what that has incorporated, that has the unencumbered number from this fiscal year in it. So the real number is, the real number we'll know when we close out the books this year, but it's in the $3 million range.
Any questions on that? And thank you for pointing that out, Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy. Seeing none, we'll go to the public on this item. Nothing from the public? Nothing back from the board? Thank you so much. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, John.
We appreciate you spending the long hours with us. Last item up for tonight, a couple items of communication. And last week, Mr. Mayor and Ms. Bassi distributed to us some follow-up items from earlier budget hearing meetings. Mr. Mayor, do you want to walk anybody through any items, or do we want to hand them out? You've got them electronically. Do you have hard copy, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. In the email that Ms. Bassi sent out, she reminded everyone to bring this. We do have 6. Does
Grab me one.
That Chris brought his.
I did bring mine. I sent it March 6th email.
Let's pass these down in the room. It's not our intent to go over these one by one, but to actually just make sure we have them.
Yeah. That
Just
sounds-
a couple of quick comments. First comment is, obviously, these meetings are long, and this month is long, and to minimize any time that's necessary in a meeting on this, you received this, you've received this on email, and this is the second night we've handed out hard copies, so everybody should have it somewhere. Feel free to call my office at any time to discuss any items here to help individual clarification. The only 3 items, or the only numerical item I want to address tonight is item number 5, which is about, it starts about the 8th page in the book. It says executive summary, all revenue by source. And this is, and the reason I want to address these very briefly this evening is just because it could help you, they're meant to help in developing your questions with respect to the revenue items when the department heads come to deliver their budgets. There's 3 reports here. First one is executive summary by all revenue source. That has the categories by GAFR and by the munis with the actual for the last couple of years, the budget for this year and last year, and then the change this year versus last year budget, and then it has supporting information on each page for each one of those. You can see license with a line item description of each change. So that can kind of prepare you, like if I'd gotten this guy to you guys sooner, this would have been a good thing to have had for example, your conversations with building tonight. And then the second one, also meant to be helpful, if you go to the next report, is called the Scheduled Proposed Revenue Budget by Department. And what you're seeing here is we've taken the sources, the source categories and aggregated them by department. So what you will have here is by each department the total revenue. And that's something that's, as I understand, it's not been issued before. But it gives you the total. It gives you the total as a percent of the budget, and it gives you, 11 and 12 actuals, 13 budget. And then it also gives you, it's got, the first column of numbers is 11 actuals, second is 12 actuals, third is 13 actuals. And then the next 4 columns basically indicate how these items for this year were calculated for the budget. The first column is the simplest one, obviously, the tax levy. The second one is department head estimate. That means that number came from the department head. There were discussions with the department heads, so they didn't, these weren't done in isolation. They were done with my office, and that's the end result. The third line item, budget source document. The source documents like lease contracts, governor's budget, those type of things where you actually have hard information on to put in here. And then the fourth line item is the 3-year average. For those items that didn't seem to make sense for the department heads, or the department heads didn't have an concept, and there was no way to really measure it, as Mr. Gillen indicated earlier today. Some items just difficult to measure. So that item is a 3-year average item. So then the 4 together gives you your total budget. And then the following report, basically, which is proposed revenue budget by source, you'll see each major line item with the definition and narrative from the department head. So the idea being that before each meeting, if you have the opportunity, when you know which departments are coming before you, you can go here as well as to the expense side. You can get a sense of both the expense and the revenues, and then you can direct your questions, have some background for your questions. And
Thank you,
again,
Mr. Mayor.
anything else that's raises questions, you have questions, just feel free to call the office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, very much. Thank you for the thorough explanation and the follow-up. In addition, just lastly, there were some communications today. Mr. Mayor and I had a conversation regarding some of the moving pieces of the budget. Obviously, due to a variety of reasons, union contracts that are still in negotiations, as well as in the process of being voted upon and finalized, as well as, in all fairness, the finance staff being somewhat new, particularly with Mr. Mayor taking over this year. There's been a state of flux or flexibility within some of the numbers. And given the fact that what's been proposed is a 6% increase in taxes, we've all expressed many times, multiple times in various settings, how we want to make sure we make the right decision. The numbers are jumping around a little bit. And Mr. Mayor and his team are working very hard on finalizing what they think the revenue expectations are going to be. They're working hard with our outside advisors on the insurance negotiations and the analysis related to potential swap out in insurance companies, what that might mean with various unions, union contracts, what that might mean with premiums. They're also looking at the union settlements and how that might impact going forward. So with all this, we just need to be cognizant that these numbers are going to move around a little bit over the next few days, which will not make our job easier. We've committed, Mr. Mayor and I, to get together and discuss these items next week, and come back, and Mr. Mayor will brief the board and Mr. Tetro as to what the adjustments may or may not be, so that we have best available information when we get together later in this process. So we should have better information on where revenue is, what the estimates were, like Mr. Gillern was talking about today, better information on collection rates, better information on any union contracts. The one that comes to mind is the police contract, which will go before the RTM later this month, what impact that might have, certainly better information on the insurance contracts. So all this is going to come together and come fast and furious. It's not optimal, but our goal is to make the best decisions for the citizens that we can, based on the best available information at the time we have to vote. So are there any questions, comments, or concerns on that? We'll keep you apprised, and certainly as I know information, you all will know information. Mr. Mayor, anything to add on that?
No, sir.
With that, does anybody have anything else this evening? You were jumping the gun.
I just love making those motions.
And go ahead, Mr. Brockfeld.
I think it's time to depart.
Do I have a second? Mr. Bolito. All in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? We're done, everybody. Good night. Thank you.